Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness. I was recently made aware of some sound issues with the last 3 episodes of the insightful series I upload to Electric Media Madness, namely that the sound was only fully audible on the left channel. This was only really noticeable to those people who use earphones and earbuds to listen to the videos. Years of being involved with the live music scene has left me somewhat sensitive hearing, so I don't tend to use earphones to watch anything or edit my videos, and as a result I never picked up on the issue until I was made aware of it by people recently. I've now re-edited these episodes with corrected sound and uploaded them all together as a bumper video here. I've placed chapters in this video for each of the episodes. Alternately, you can jump to the time codes in the video description. Episode 5, I'm joined by guest Mark Conlon to talk about the 1983 miniseries and cautionary tale V. In episode 6, Mark Devlin joins me to talk about the occult aspects of the cult classic sci-fi film Metropolis. And in episode 7, I'm joined by Kieran Woodhouse to look into the myriad esoteric aspects of David Lynch's opus TV series Twin Peaks. Many thanks again for all your support, and I hope you enjoy watching these videos. Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness. Joining me for another insightful, I have a very special guest with me today, Mark Conlon. How you doing, mate?
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on, Carl.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
If people aren't sure about Mark's research, please go and check out his stuff. His main place is Mark Conlon blogspot.com, is that right?
Yeah, that's a mouthful, yeah.
Yeah. You've also got a YouTube channel of the same name. And you've also got Enlightened Times podcast.
That's correct, Carl. Yeah,
YouTube, and I think you've got help on.
I've got it on
a couple of other places,
well.
BitChute as well. Have you got Odyssey as well?
Yeah, there's an Odyssey, but mainly a lot of my stuff's on the Enlightened Times podcast. There's stuff on BitChute, stuff we sometimes can't talk about.
Yeah,
and I've got the Mark Conlon blogspot. That's a BitChute channel as well, which has got far more than the YouTube stuff.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah. So I encourage people to go and check it all out. Mark is a really good, really thorough researcher of 9/11 and various other subjects as well, but principally it's that. And it complements people like Dr. Judy Wood and Andrew Johnson very, very well. It all fits nicely together. It's some really good stuff there. Please check it out if you can. And so you and I can't remember how long ago it was that we first crossed paths. It might have been way back in
it was a long time ago,
2012, 13, something like around about there. Just crossed past at various talks that you and I were going to, other people's, and you came to a few of mine as well, and that. And
I've been to quite a few of yours, Carl.
Yeah. Oh, bless you, mate. Yeah.
And through Andrew Johnson as well, we sort of met as well, didn't we? So
yeah. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on, because obviously alternative knowledge researcher like myself, and you do have an interest in science fiction as well, like I do.
Yeah.
So which is I do. Always helpful with these subjects. But it's kind of like tying it all together. We talked about doing this one for a while and things got in the way. Yeah. And then we've got round to doing it today. We're going to talk about the miniseries V from 1983. And this one is a fascinating one. I call it a cautionary tale to history. People can learn a lot from it, even despite the dodgy special effects in it.
Yeah.
But did you watch this the first time round, or is this something I might be giving your age away? I don't know.
Yeah. I did watch it, and something we'll come on to later on is how things seem a little bit different to when I watched it the first time round.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was 1985. I think
it was 85. It was broadcast in the UK.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I seem to remember it being around about that point in time. Yeah. It's a great show. I mean, like I say, the special effects haven't aged too well. The acting's a little bit hammy, but in terms of story, especially the first one,
God.
really does it. So I don't know if you want to tell our viewers, listeners, just like in case they've never watched it before, just a general gist of what V is all about, just a general premise of the story.
Yeah, well, it's about some visitors from outer space who turn up in a fleet of UFO spacecrafts over various cities around the world, and they sort of go onto the stage in New York. I think it was United Nations building, which Carl reminded me of, and they announced their arrival. And they come in the guise that they are friendly,
Yes.
and they need our help. They need human help too, and they sort of going to exchange a bit of help with technology back to us to help us with things, but it sort of declines into a little bit of out and out fascism and authoritarianism
pretty quickly, actually. Yeah.
yeah, and then which a lot of people buy, that they're friends and they want to help them. But there's a section or a few people who become resistant and see what's going on. That all is not what it seems to be why they've come here and for the reasons that they've announced.
Which is a good reason why it's worth talking about it. That amongst other
God,
things.
Yeah, it is. And so you get this resistance, and they build and they're trying to fight back against this and expose what's going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of propaganda from the visitors as they
take over the media, don't they?
Yeah. And so you got this battle going on for freedom, really.
Yeah.
From fascism, and it descends into martial law. There's an enemy which they propagate, which is the scientists.
Yes.
Our scientists, section of scientists. Yeah. So it's an alien invasion to some degree. And they promise that they're going to help us with secret technologies and cures and things like that. Yeah. So, but it just descends into this battle for freedom and to expose what's going on.
Yeah.
I remember you can into the procreation of an alien baby during
there
this
is that aspect as well. Yeah.
So it's just such an interesting storyline. And the way it's done, I think it's brilliant, really.
Yeah. It's interesting because it kind of like touches on a lot of things that come up in our research. Some people believe in them, some people don't. There's some things, which we might get into. I don't know about the reptilian aspect of it as well.
Yes.
So I'm kind of, as I said to you, I'm kind of on the fence with that one, but but nevertheless fascinated by it all. It's something that's been knocking around for years, hasn't it? Daniken and obviously David Icke took that one on out around the world for a long time as well, didn't he?
He did. I'm like you. I'm sort of on the fence with that sort of stuff, but I can understand that in a concept as well. Because of the lack of empathy or the way they behave is a little bit. I'm talking more in the David Icke realms of the people he talks about, and shape shifting and things like that.
That it literally is that thing of sometimes where you say, "Oh, that person's so cold-blooded, they're cold-hearted, aren't they?" It's that kind of thing with the reptilian with this, isn't it? Yeah.
So it is.
Whether it's a metaphor, Ken Johnson, who created V, he was putting some bloody good stuff out there. He really was. He was.
Yeah.
So what did he do again? Yeah, he was. What was he involved with before that? Was it the $6 million man?
$6 million man, Bionic Woman, and the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Which I watched as a kid. All them. I watched all of them.
I mean, it's a story that's. I suppose you could really argue that, because certainly he said it was a metaphor for things that had been going on during the Second World War. That's pretty blatant in the story, especially with like the Holocaust narrative and the character of Abraham, the granddad of the family, who's he's seen it happen before. He's starting to see it happen again. So we'll get into that, and the brown shirts as well, the visitors group in it and all that. The first thing was that I noticed that was interesting was, and this kind of ties in with my War of the Worlds research, which which I've done an interview with you recently where we talked about that. Is this idea of people getting the message via the media, and that was, I thought, was really fascinating at the beginning. How they're all huddled around the television watching, aren't they? And that chap Elias, who breaks into that house to do a bit of thieving, and he gets the radios working, he puts the telly on, and then he's just sat there watching the telly in the house. So, what did you think of that? Yeah, because I thought that was interesting.
I think that it's like you say, it does tie into your War of the Worlds, isn't it? Through the media and how they sort of introduce that. Well, they're giving us that concept, aren't they? That they're tuning into that, and then obviously this is where it begins with this.
So it's all filtered down through the media, isn't it? Through the
yes, and that I mean, just to say, after what we've, we went through,
Yeah,
after
yeah.
watching that again, it's like
And from
it
2020
becomes more
onwards, yeah,
real that
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
something like that happening.
And how people react as well. That was something else I picked up on.
Yes.
You know, like some people are in awe, some people are frightened, some
Mm.
people are curious, and that kind of plays out with where people sort of put their allegiances, don't they? As it
Yes.
goes on, you get some
Oh,
people who
absolutely.
collaborate with them, some people who fight against them,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
kind of again, what you were touching on. Obviously, we have to be careful what we say, but
Yeah.
2020, you know,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
being forced into their little camps, pitted against each other.
Yeah. Yeah. The divide and conquer, isn't it? I guess it's sort
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
like you say, who are you with? You with them or you with us? Type of thing.
yeah,
Choose your side.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because you see it with some of the visitor characters as well, don't you? Because you have this
Yeah.
the one guy who's Willie, Robert Englund, who
Yes.
played Freddy Krueger.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And he was quite a likable character
he was, wasn't he?
in
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know what it was, Carl, but he had. I don't know if it was his face, but I don't know. He was quite a character to. Felt
Mm.
sorry for him, really.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. Because he kind of makes out that he does admit in it that he knows what they're there for.
Yeah. He
Um,
does.
but you kind of get the feeling that I don't know so much if it's whether he agrees with it or not, or it's just that the more he's been around humans,
Yeah.
and especially like the Harmony character that treats him nice and that, you know,
Yes.
that he
Yes.
starts to see maybe from being around us that he's thinking maybe this isn't such a good idea, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So it sort of grows into that, doesn't he? I suppose
yeah,
seeing that
yeah,
um, and building that relationship.
yeah. But we do
Yeah.
know there's a resistance amongst the visitors as well, isn't there? There's a like a
Yes.
fifth column group or something like that they call
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah. And one of them, I think one of them was giving, if I'm correct me if I might be wrong, was helping Donovan or
That's right. Yeah, I can't
going for
remember his name. Was
information
it
being, yeah.
Martin?
Yeah.
Martin, that was his
Yeah.
name. Yeah, yeah. He was one of the good guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's interesting that you've got that. So whether they're call them not whistleblowers, but
yeah.
feeding information,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to our cause, if
That's right.
look at it like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So going back to the character of Abraham, they're talking about what their intentions might be, and I picked up on a line of dialogue where he says, "If they are hostile, I'm not sure where we would find a hiding place."
I think it brought a lot back for him, didn't it? If I
Mm,
remember correctly with that, and his suspicions or what he knew, of what they were here for.
yeah,
Not good intentions.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah,
could actually see through it, couldn't he?
yeah.
And he was trying to, because they actually took people in, didn't they? They
That's
took
right.
some
Yeah,
scientists
and
in,
help
yeah,
them out.
and helped them out. And
Yeah, he told the story, didn't he, about how he'd was would it did they smuggle was it he was
yeah,
smuggled out or his
yeah,
child was smuggled out or
yeah.
something? Oh, that's it. Yeah, it was the son was
The,
smuggled out, wasn't he, from the
that's
camps?
it. Yeah, yeah,
And he said, you know, if somebody had have helped us, maybe things would have turned out differently, and that's makes him want
yeah,
to help out.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quite a profound moment in that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In that.
So they mention about how they're coming in peace, and he's obviously
Yes.
looking very skeptical, isn't he? He's like, are they really?
Yeah, yeah. He's not
Yeah.
buying it, is he?
No, no. And you hear all the different back and forwards. You get like Juliet, the character, and her boyfriend at the time. He says, talk about an offer we can't refuse. You know, when they're saying,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah,
big up all your science and give you all these cures and da-da. And she
yeah,
says, I wonder what would happen if we didn't. And she's I think she's a junior doctor, is she, or something like that, training to be a
yeah.
doctor? That,
I think
and
so. Yes, yes.
it's the people like it's the anthropologists and the scientists, the doctors, and they're the
Yeah,
ones that are, and they start disappearing, don't they? I don't know if you want to talk a
yeah.
little bit about that because
The scientists become the enemy, don't they? For
mm,
them, they put out a lot of propaganda about
yeah,
about them, and they're obviously being smuggled places, aren't they? Some of them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That family, if I remember correctly.
You start to see the things that's going on in the news about the compromise, and that was what I was picking up on was interesting with the attitude towards the scientists.
Yes,
So
yes,
I'll just read out that little bit from the dialogue quickly first, and
yeah,
then we can discuss it. So the person on the news at the time says, The world was shocked today when Nobel Prize winner Dr. Maurice Jankowski of the Brussels Biomedical Institute in Belgium held a press conference to reveal the existence of an international conspiracy against the visitors. And then that doctor comes on and he says, it came to my attention first when Dr. Rudolf Metz in California came to me. Other colleagues here have also been approached by scientists, primarily medical and anthropological scientists from many nations who are part of the conspiracy. Their plans, quite simply, are to seize control of several motherships belonging to the visitors. They tried hard to convince me that it was to protect the human race or to keep such powers from the military. That was an interesting thought. I thought that was. I do believe, however, that their motivation is far more personal. And then they talk about how he says, like the international scope, a score of medical scientists come forward to admit they have been approached or actually confess that they were part of the conspiracy. And then you start to see doctors being framed, don't you?
Yeah.
Doctors disappearing.
Yes.
And I can't remember who it was. One of the characters said, maybe it's because they know that we're the doctors and the anthropologists. They're the ones that are going to figure out what potential vulnerabilities, how we can stop them and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And also find out what their real agenda is.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Again, obviously we have to be careful what we say on YouTube,
yeah.
but it was the thing that happened in 2020. Obviously, medical professionals, they were the ones who were ostracized for questioning the official narrative.
Yes.
And they talked about conspiracy theories amongst doctors and scientists and all that kind of thing, and anti-somethings and things like that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I just kept thinking about that in my head when I was watching it, when I was making my notes. So I don't know what you thought about that, because I
exactly that, Carl, because it's almost like they created a consensus, didn't they? Of this is the science, this is it. If you question it, you're a conspiracy theorist type of thing. So like you say, ostracizing, which is exactly what's in V. And they were circulating that propaganda, wasn't they? It's exactly the same as 2020 in a way, because like you say, it's the scientists were, anybody outside of that consensus was
they were the people
labeled,
you know, in
dangerous.
2020, let's face it, they were the people who were going to sway consensus. They were the people who were going to make people question things and think a bit differently, from rather than just being spoon-fed what was going on by the media, you know. And this is exactly what happens in V. You've got the official narrative being sped by the media, and then you've got the scientists who can potentially debunk that.
Yes.
So,
well, in a way, which I think is very similar to 2020, is how they had their journalists in place who were going to push that type of stuff. How can we put it? You know, the propaganda. And it's the same in V, isn't it? They had their trusted journalist who was their go-to person, who
Christine
their
Walsh,
face of and I think that's a real key thing, isn't it? You know, 2020 and V, you know.
I mean, you could probably argue that there's probably many things that have happened throughout history where it's been a similar case. You know, but I think because it's so fresh, because it happened so recently, that was why it really stuck out like a sore thumb for me. And I thought, you know, these things.
It was almost like quite a close call to home. I think that with the martial law. It was a very close call to what we encountered. You know, here, you know, witnessed.
And again, I picked up on this one. I think this was a little bit after that in the miniseries. The news saying it's still too early to determine how many scientists may be involved. The UN has agreed to visitor request that all scientists and their families must register their whereabouts with authorities. Computers will be used to verify their registration. Where did we hear that recently?
Oh God,
about digital IDs and that.
Yes, and
passports and whatnot.
Track and trace.
It's another one of those things, isn't it? Yeah. And because, as I was saying to you, it's not just this. It's obviously things that, because obviously Ken Johnson based a lot of this on stuff in World War II and all that. Because Abraham, the granddad, he says, I think it was his son who says to him, "Oh, it's going to pass." And he said, that's what I said in 1938 back in Berlin.
Yes, yeah,
You know?
yeah. Which is similar to what we were. I don't want to keep harping on about 2020 too much,
Yeah.
but
No.
it's similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it'll go. We'll just get this, and got dragged on, didn't it?
Yeah.
Quite a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Another thing I picked up on as well, and this week could be an interesting discussion. Again, I don't know how much of it we could say on YouTube, but
Yeah,
they talk about revolutionary new cancer treatments that do exist and have existed for some time, along with many other breakthroughs, which apparently our scientists have kept quiet about. And when they're asking him about it, and he says, well, there's a lot of money to be made in research grants.
yes. Well, again, it's a reality, isn't it? Of the science, call it the science industry, or that with their funding, isn't it? It's who's funding them, and
you and I have looked
results.
into a lot of that, haven't we, over the years here and there?
Yeah,
this idea of suppressed treatments, and I mean, one of the ones that I always remember was that was it Raymond Rife? Royal Raymond Rife?
Yes. He's along with some others, wasn't there?
Yeah, there's loads. These
treatments, and to reversal of diseases and things like that.
That's right. So I mean, in this case, they're saying, because they're trying to badmouth the scientists, aren't they?
Yes.
And they're trying to say, oh, the scientists, look how bad they are. They kept all of these cures for things from you. It's like it's a reversal, isn't it? In this, they're actually trying to blacklist the scientists to ostracize them, get them out of the way, kind of thing.
Yeah, they're trying to call into question the trust, isn't it? Of
that's
don't
right.
Trust it, whereas we had the opposite, trust the science.
That's right, exactly.
It's literally the opposite, isn't it? Don't trust the scientists.
Yeah, scapegoating, isn't it? Another thing that I picked up on was how people start to get ostracized just by being associated with medical people.
Again, it's a common theme, isn't it? Of them and us, and guilty by association, or even, oh, you're such a bad person. You with that particular group over there, are you?
Yeah, that's right.
You're dangerous. You might kill Granny.
Mm-hmm.
So,
that's right.
Again, it's setting that up, isn't it? In V, it's setting that up, the them and us, the division.
It is,
which we've seen loads.
Throughout
2020, I've never seen it before.
Not on that scale. No. I haven't. No. I mean, you could argue that maybe like an extension of that would be the stuff that I've looked at a little bit with the the sort of what do you call it? I suppose you call it like the woke nuffs that's going on in the world. That's been dividing and conquering people as well. So there's been a lot of it going on the last few years, hasn't there? So I think
it has. Yeah. It's like an indoctrination, isn't it? Of sorts. Again, creates them and us. And it's divide and conquer.
Yeah. And it's also that
tool.
Oh yeah, it is, because you've got people then looking around and thinking, who can I trust?
Yeah.
If you can't, you're not even trusting your own family, and that's happens in V, and we've seen an outgrowth of that in the real world, haven't we? So it's
yeah. I mean, just to touch on that bit, Carl, because you had the snitching. People snitching. And you've got that one particular character in V who swore allegiance to them.
Daniel, he joins up with them, doesn't he?
Yeah, and we got that other woman as well, the elderly woman.
That's right. Yeah.
Who's
Donovan's mom.
Yeah,
she's his own mom.
Yeah. I mean, which is it's.
I know.
We've seen
it's difficult to talk
things.
about it, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It, to be honest, Carl, it's very. I find it hard to believe we got, in a way, we got to that situation. We allowed ourselves to get into that situation.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does bring it home when you watch V.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I've always had a sense that situation was going to happen at some point.
Yes.
But when it did happen,
hoped and prayed it never would. But
but the fact that it did happen is, again, it does. It's not a nice feeling.
No.
It doesn't put you in much trust with the
No.
future type of thing.
Yeah. It, one of the things that I always felt, and I mean, I was quite lucky actually, because a lot of the people, even outside of our circle, I had some close friends and people like that who were really, they'd got their heads screwed on properly, and they knew what was going on. And it wasn't just difficult for me, it was difficult for them as well to see things going on in their families. People had problems with work and things like that as well, in terms of their working relationships, colleagues, friends, things like that. And I always felt that, I suppose maybe I was being a bit naive because of the type of things that we look into, that I always felt that there might probably be enough people who questioned things in the world, that there would be enough. I had a conversation with a friend of mine recently about it, and she said that, I think the difference is when people are potentially feeling threatened for their life, or their loved ones threatened for their life because of the way it was portrayed. That was the changing point. It became something tangible then for them. And
like yourself, you probably knew where it was unfolding and what was going to happen, and where they was taking the narrative and where it would lead to. So a bit like, for me, I was hoping that there'd be a few more people who would question, have the critical reasoning to question what we're being told. But and I think to some degree, as the more ridiculous things that we were being asked to do, I did see people start to question that. Then
that might have been the point. I think when it
dragged on a bit too long.
And
when they were saying, don't stand up and you can't go over there, and if you're sitting down, you're okay, and all that sort of stuff. I think people started to think this is a load of rubbish. This is
why something suddenly becomes not a problem at a certain time of the day. And then all of a sudden it was like 10 minutes beforehand and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that made people, I mean, obviously for people watching, it's very difficult to talk about this because of the way things are, especially on YouTube at the moment. But so we're being a bit cryptic about it, but you know what we mean.
Vague, aren't we?
Where we're coming from. So as an extension from that, what you were saying about people ratting people out, basically snitching on people, that happens, doesn't it? We have Daniel. He reports the fact that his own family are hiding scientist family in the pool house out in the garden, and that,
yes. So he was a fully fledged member with them, wasn't he? He was fully signed up. I mean, I got the impression he liked the power, didn't he? And he really had ambition to get on with them, didn't he? Really being used by them.
And I mean, it was obviously a metaphor for the youth movement in Germany during the Second World War, and that. You could see that with the colour of the uniforms they were wearing as well, and that kind of thing. But it was like he talked about how a local shopkeeper had given him that bottle of champagne and all that, and it's like champagne for breakfast, how classy and all this kind of thing, So you could see it was about, for him, it was about power, wealth, possessions, all that kind of thing, very blinkered. And
I mean, I did see, are we okay just mentioning about 2020? I did see elements of that when it was like, I'm a key worker. I'm a critical worker. I'm an essential worker.
I saw that myself because I work in the healthcare profession. So I saw it myself.
I've got a lanyard. I can jump the queue. I can't stay home. I've got to go to work.
I mean, I have to be careful what I say, obviously.
Of course,
but, I saw people basically acting like they were saving the world, like they were one of the Avengers, and they were talking about things that other people I know had seen exactly the same things, myself included as well, different things. And I'm thinking, how is it that you've seen exactly the same thing as another person, and yet your interpretation of it is so completely different? How is that? What's going on in your head? Is it just an ego thing, or is there some sort of cognitive I don't know. It's just.
I mean, I think it can work. I think there was a lot of play towards the ego to sort of, if you want to call it, activate that element of people. Because it's that thing of once you put a high-vis jacket on someone, their psychology of changes and their physiology changes, and it does make them feel more important or power, or, you know. Because we did see quite a lot of people.
I've seen that a lot in the job I do over the years.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you've seen it if you went into a garage and for example, and where's your mask? And you know, they changed completely, and even people walking around, you know. So it does, you know, it did appeal to the ego, and I think power is a big thing of that, which is what happened with Danny in V, wasn't it? He enjoyed that.
The same with Mike Donovan's mom. You know, the power, the prestige. You know, she talks to her husband, don't she, about you want to get yourself signed up for that with the power plant. You know, get your, you know, maybe prestigious and all that. I think was the word she used. And
so again, there's another element to that, isn't it? With V, so they're really, you can see that, and you know, happening. I think in society, you know, more so than ever in 2020.
Another area which is worth looking at as well, and again, we have to be careful about how we present these things in the real world, but
we just
pulling a staged thing on the media the visitors doing this. So I'll just read out that bit of dialogue. So John, the leader of the visitors, comes on the news. I must thank the leaders of each of your countries who have graciously turned over all their broadcasting facilities to avoid confusion in this crisis. I'm sad to say that there has been a carefully coordinated and quite violent attempt by the conspiracy of scientists to commandeer control of our facilities. And then you see all these pictures of buildings burning on the news and all that, these so-called attacks and that. And then he says, thousands have been wounded, and we're fearful there will be more attacks. The outbreak is so widespread and so dangerous that most civilian members of your government have asked us for protection. Your national leaders have suggested that a state of martial law will be helpful at this time. We will do our best to see you through it and maintain control.
Order, control, it's just classic, isn't it? It's just classic. You know, everything we've sort of seen last over 3 years ago. You know, and by extension, things that happened 20 years ago as well. You know, well,
that stuff is
It's again, it's. I mean.
Thousands of people have died, and more could die if this happens, and that kind of thing. It's
that narrative, isn't it? Be a building, and you know, I was trying to think of it actually, Carl. When you mentioned that, it was like striking a chord with, you know, it's about bringing people together, isn't it? Against the common enemy.
But
it's actually inverted, isn't it?
It is, and I do like that about V, that they show the other, you know, they show the resistance, the pushback against it. And there's no, I mean, in the days when these stories were told so much more simply on television than they are nowadays, you know, fictional stories as well, you know, it's very clear. There's no ambiguity. There's no sort of like, these good guys aren't really good guys. They're morally questionable. They're literally fighting for survival. They're fighting for the human race, you know, and there's no, you know, no one questions that. They just get on with it, don't they? It's
obviously it was more of an invisible enemy before, wasn't it? You know, 3 years ago, and it's about getting that common cause and patriotism of, you know, people together, which I think we seen with an event in 2001, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. You
know, same sort of, on that sort of scale. People.
And you get the propaganda as well, with the like the posters going up in V, going up around the, you know, the propaganda posters, "We are your friends" and all this kind of thing. And I kept thinking about things that were slapped up on bus shelters and that in a few years back, you know, and your part and all this kind of thing. And I mean, that's an extension of the propaganda from World War II as well, isn't it? And things like that, you know.
We want you.
Wasn't
it? You know. step up and do your bit.
Yeah,
Because that's what it was, wasn't it? You know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
same
yeah,
as in V, you got to play your
yeah,
role.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And they keep banging that drum in it. They say the clear and present danger still exists
yeah,
from the group of terrorists, they call them in it.
yeah.
At this point now, they're not conspiracy scientists anymore. You know,
No,
they brought about the need for martial law.
if you
Yeah,
just don't stay home and do as you're told, then this
yeah,
is going to
yeah,
have to
yeah,
continue. It's all those over there who are not doing as they're told. We're going to have to
yeah.
keep it going.
One of the things that, and I think you'd already mentioned about this, but I just thought I'd mention it as well, was
Yeah.
that the chap who was running the gardening company, you know, the truck, as
Oh,
he
yes,
gets them
yeah,
out, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and he goes up to her window originally, doesn't he? And he says,
Mhm.
"I can't work for you anymore.
Yeah,
The other people that I work for, they don't like it, you
yeah,
know." So
yeah,
it's sort of passive ostracizing
yeah,
as well, isn't it? From,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's not even a case of you doing anything wrong anymore. It's who you're mixing with, who you're talking to. You know, it's
Yes,
and she
yes.
says, because my husband is a scientist, and he says, well, they say that I can either work for you or work for them. Divide and conquer, isn't it?
Oh
Same old
God, yeah.
story.
That's a good psychology, you know, tool, isn't it? That they
Oh
do
yeah.
that they've used for, like, you know, as far back as we can remember.
Oh
You
yeah.
know,
It's
yeah.
yeah, classic
Like
psychological
you're saying,
warfare going back
back
through
in
the
the
ages,
wars.
isn't it? Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. The daughter gets beaten up at school because the dad's a dirty scientist or something like that. There's another
Yeah.
line in it. And the
Yes.
locals, they throw a brick through the window, don't they, when they're in the evening watching
Yeah.
the local gangs going round. The other one I wanted to bring to your attention, because I don't know what your thoughts on this one, right? So this is about the way the media portrays things. So
Yes.
that Daniel's dad says, "I'm so tired of seeing her face on the television, only seeing one side of the story." And he said, "Well, the truth is the truth." And he says, "Well, why not let somebody else say something?" You know, so there's like this, and the mum says, "And you got the newspapers as well," and he says, "Well, yeah, they're saying
Yeah.
exactly the same thing," you know.
Yeah. It
So
almost reminds me of a quote I seen the other day. I've been down the rabbit hole that many times. As soon as I hear that, well, it would be on the news, wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Everybody would know about it. And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
oh, deep
yeah,
despair. So
yeah,
yeah, yeah, it does throw that up, doesn't it?
yeah.
That there was only giving one side of
Story, yeah,
the
yeah,
narrative and an
yeah,
argument, you know,
yeah,
against no question. You can't question
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
But again, it does highlight that, doesn't it, about the unquestioning
Mm,
and the trust in media.
yeah. The reason why I thought it'd be
Yeah,
interesting to put that to you is because you, I mean, obviously, again, we've been careful how we've talked about things. We
yeah,
haven't used certain words and that, so we
hmm
should be all right. How we get away with putting this out there. But you've put stuff out over the last several years on social media and things like that, and you've had accounts shut down, and it's happened to you quite a bit,
yeah.
hasn't it?
Oh God, yeah.
So it is that thing of what happens to people when they present an alternative narrative on something, which is why I thought that scene in V was
Mm,
interesting. It made me think of you. You know, I mean, it's
right, yeah. Well, like you say, I mean, I had my YouTube that really, without warning, was completely terminated,
mm,
and the Google account,
yeah, yeah,
which is quite rare at the time. That was
yeah,
in 2017. To get the Google account back, but it showed the beginning of the level of
yeah,
censorship, because I think back that time they were allowing certain things on, but in particular the things that I was talking about or trying to
yeah,
expose
yeah,
was very, very touchy for them,
yeah, yeah.
and they didn't like it.
Mm.
So again, it's like you say, but I think it's the iron fist now, isn't it? It's just
Oh, it is now.
absolute. It's full on.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's no holding back. They can just
No.
get off.
Mm,
You
mm.
know, I mean, they did it to quite a few round. 3 years ago, they just wiped
Yeah,
them out,
yeah,
didn't they? They
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
allowed. Same,
Mm.
same, like you say with Facebook, and just going back to that with the people. You put something out,
Hmm.
you get a deluge of people just attacking you all over the
Yeah,
shop,
yeah, yeah.
and you have to really. It does show you test the character with that,
It
you
does.
know.
Yeah,
But what the most annoying thing is, which in that situation is, um, you can present every evidence and facts
Yeah.
and they just say, well, that's your opinion.
Mhm. No, it's
Or, you know,
evidence
or
and facts. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, well, no,
Yeah.
have you read this? But then they don't want to read. You send numerous
Mhm.
links to people. They don't want to read it. You know,
No, no,
so that
no.
was annoying. But it's like you say, the censorship in V. It's
Mm,
like you say, they don't allow the other side of the argument, do they? They've set
that's
the
right.
propaganda up against a particular
Completely.
section of society.
What worries me is how the online harms thing recently as well. You know, the
Yes.
laws that they've been trying to pass on
Hmm.
what they call extreme
Yeah.
content and
Yeah.
opinion and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's branched out now into all kinds of areas, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You've
way
got
beyond
people.
all the stuff that happened in 2020 onwards. You know, it's
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that was the perhaps 2020 was like the big step, wasn't it?
I
It
think so,
went.
yeah, because it was certainly kicking off around about 2016 that online
Yes.
harms was being talked about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that was. It's been, carefully planned, and how can I put this? In a way, I don't know how you feel about it, but there's things being done which are playing into the hands to get that through, that legislation through,
oh yeah,
that
yeah,
bill.
yeah.
Certain events that,
Hmm.
how can I put this? Um, that been happened, but things have been allowed to happen to
Yeah,
encourage the online
yeah, yeah,
safety bill, which
yeah,
will
yeah,
be quite devastating
yeah.
bill if it passes.
Oh, absolutely.
You
People
know,
think it's bad enough now. It's gonna,
yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean
yeah.
that it's quite frightening.
It
I
is
mean, you won't
frightening.
have a voice at all
No, no,
if that gets through. I don't
no.
think.
You literally will be in that world then of like V, where
Yeah,
you the only thing you will hear anything different will be people talking face to face.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
anything online broadcast will pretty much be just one narrative and that's it. I mean, that
yeah,
sounds alarmist, but I think, I didn't think that could happen, but then I didn't think many things could have happened over the last few years and they did. So I think this is plausible. I think the onus is on people to really, wherever they can, call this out, fight back against it. But it's what you've
yeah.
been doing. I'm proud of you for doing it because you just,
Oh, thank you.
you just kept going at it, and sod what they think. I'll just, I'll just keep pointing these things
It,
out, and it's
it yeah. I mean, it does get tiresome, as you know.
mm,
You just plod on, and there's times you just want to give up and just. I'd like to think I've tried.
yeah,
When I shuffle off back to source, I can look at, I can look in
yeah.
that mirror and say, well, I did step up.
I did
If
what I
that's what
could
I've
do.
come here
Yeah,
to do,
yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've I've stepped up and I've done something that I'm not comfortable doing.
yeah, 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 yeah,
To speak out in 2020, I wasn't comfortable to do that on that
yeah,
scale.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And lost a lot of friends
Mm,
through it, and a lot of people I don't talk to. Luckily, not family.
hmm.
My family were very awake because
Yeah,
things I spoke about, years
yeah,
ago.
like you, I was very lucky. There was a few hiccups along the way,
Yeah,
here and there with people close to me, but by and large, we got through the other side of it all,
yeah,
still being sort of pretty much on the same page. They don't,
mm,
or some of them don't always agree with me on a lot of
yeah,
things, but
yeah,
I think where it matters, they at least, if nothing else, they've been respectful enough to certainly not judge me for it.
yeah.
I mean, that's the least you can ask of somebody, isn't it? You
I
can't just
mean,
sit there judging
yeah,
people for their, you know.
no, no, and it's like you say there. Whatever happened to healthy debate,
Hmm.
whatever happened to healthy, that you've got where your position is, and that's okay.
Yeah,
That
yeah, yeah.
changed a lot in 2020.
It did, yeah, yeah, yeah,
That wasn't the case.
yeah,
It had a lot of attachments. Think you're selfish. Loads of labels. I could
yeah,
quite
yeah,
clearly see what was going on because of
yeah, yeah,
my own background. I've studied a part of psychology to do what I used to do
yeah.
for a living, and that it was quite clear to me on day one. Well, even before day one, what was going to happen
Oh yeah, yeah,
and how it was going to happen
yeah,
and how they were using.
Yeah.
the NLP, all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff, and nudging,
Yeah. Yeah.
which, if you don't mind me, I can say,
Mm-hmm.
and we can edit it out if you have to, but them psychologists acted unethically. There's no doubt about
Yes.
that. They
Yeah. Yeah.
broke their
Yeah.
own ethical codes.
Yeah.
Who were
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
them nudge units,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I've made my feelings quite
Mm-hmm.
public about that.
Yeah.
Even to the point of ringing up their ethical bodies,
Yeah.
to
Good for you.
let
Yeah.
them know that I know that was unethical.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But again, it's
Well, they kind of,
not nice.
they. I don't know if it's by design or by default. I mean, sometimes they do know, sometimes they don't, and they're just swept along with it all.
Yeah.
They go to this argument of, oh well, for the greater good and all this
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah.
And that's just
But where do you define,
it's an
as I
excuse
did
as far
say,
as I'm concerned.
yeah, about psychological harm?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you mentioned about the book, A
Mm-hmm.
State of Fear.
Yeah, yeah.
Psychological harm is inflicted. I do look at people who perhaps are still wearing a
Yeah,
covering, and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
to some
yeah.
degree that's changed their psychology from if you'd
Oh,
have seen them 3 or 4 years
absolutely,
ago.
absolutely.
They are obviously walking
Mhm.
around more frightened. For some, I can understand some of them because I'm quite a compassionate person. For example, somebody who might be autistic who,
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
and the
Yeah, I'm not.
quietness of it all and isolation,
Yeah, yeah,
I totally get that. But yeah, but I know there's some who, like you say, there's some perhaps nefarious
yeah, 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 yeah. I should add that
aspects to
caveat.
that.
What you're
Yeah,
saying is absolutely right. Yeah,
yeah,
because there's some
yeah,
people who, yeah, it can't be helped. It's the way
yeah.
that it's not their
And
fault. But shall we dare to go down the rabbit hole with this one? Shall we talk about the
yes,
reptilian thing?
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
an interesting one.
It is.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that one? Because clearly in this, they are reptiles disguised as humans. They've got like a human skin covering, haven't they? And
Yeah.
they wear like contacts in their eyes and that. What do you think about
I,
the whole thing in terms of our world?
so it's like I said, I'm on the fence with it, Brock. There's part of me that feels there's quite a lot of validity to that concept because of what I see with what we call human behaviour,
Mm-hmm.
and also our origins of the R complex and all that sort
Yeah,
of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
So there is that connection there,
Mm.
So I could quite, not unquestionably, but I could quite easily get this concept. And when I see people, I mean, you can call them psychopaths,
Yeah,
but when you see
basically.
people in power or in certain bloodlines of, call them blue bloods,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like they don't know how to behave.
No, no.
They're very very uneasy about it. And the no empathy, it's or anything. And is that and we hear all this. We've mentioned Mr. Reich, so it's
Yeah, I
like
mean he's
it's
brought it
something
up
I
over
could
the
buy
years, hasn't
into
he?
quite
Yeah, yeah,
easily. As
yeah.
a and I do see. I mean, I'm under no illusion. Videos can be
Oh, absolutely.
messed with in this day and age,
Yeah.
but
You have to. I think the
yeah,
problem is that there's
my
a lot of
mind's open.
muddling.
Yeah,
Yeah, mine is as well. Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of muddling that goes on, and I think when you present it as just a basic concept, like in V, a human, a reptilian, a lizard person or whatever,
yeah,
disguised as a human, and you think, oh, you've watched V,
yeah,
but when you put it into like a real world context, and again, it opens itself up so much to people just making a mockery of it.
It's difficult, isn't it, Carl?
This
Because
is the problem, yeah.
we can't go and, like I've done in the past, I can go somewhere and verify something
Yeah, you can,
or speak to somebody
yeah,
involved.
yeah,
and you can get you can glean some information which can sway you or keep you sat on the vent. So it's difficult for us. And where I think you'd probably be the same, I'm guessing, we're very wary of things, of psychological operations and stuff that they do run.
To
discredit or to push that that type of thinking. But I think as a concept, and I mean, I don't know if David Icke seen Teddy shapeshift, and the black eyes. I don't know that. I can only take that person's word for it, and but it's a tough one. I think he had a bit of hot water with that, didn't we, Jesse Ventura, when he confronted him about that, and it's not something you can easily prove.
No, that's the problem, isn't it?
That's the problem. And I think that's where it's convenient rabbit holes to go down for some, organisations, isn't it, that want to make us look.
And it's that chicken in the egg thing as well, isn't it? Because with V was broadcast well before David Icke even remotely got into this subject. I mean, he has said that he read like Eric von Daniken and stuff like that, and got a lot of, inspiration from things like that as well. So it's not, and that stuff was before V. So the idea of reptilianism has been there sort of in human history, hasn't it? It's an interesting one. I don't know where, like you, I'll kind of sit on the fence with it. I'm open to it, but
I mean, I think it's different. I mean, when you compare it to something like the Star Child skull,
that's a completely
that's more tangible.
There's evidence.
There's evidence there. There's the DNA. It's been carbon dated, hasn't it, and all that.
That's right.
And Lloyd Pye, really good case.
Absolutely,
that type of thing is like an alien thing. So, I mean, with this V and the alien sort of invasion, they've sort of portrayed the alien as shape, but not they portrayed them as lizard people. Who are covered with, dressed up as humans, so to speak. Which is different to they live, isn't it?
Exactly.
Which is another good.
Oh yeah, I've got the T-shirt on here.
So it's interesting how they're coming at that on that concept of where this alien invasion's happening, but they're like lizard people. Now I don't necessarily think of aliens or ETs as lizard people.
No, isn't it interesting how? And people have said, it's to do with budgets, special effects, makeup, things like that. But isn't it interesting how quite often, not always, but quite often in science fiction, when you have aliens, they always come in as sort of like a form of, they're disguised, or they, like in Star Trek, they make them look more like humans generally. And that kind of thing. So it's not like, and even when they're out and out alien, like the Alien films, Ridley Scott and all that, and James Cameron and that, there's still an element of how they interact with humans. They impregnate the human through the throat and all that, and out the chest and all the rest of it. So it's rare that you get just an out and out alien. There's always sort of a muddling of it in some way. In these narratives in the films,
and they're always green.
And quite often,
As the other area is it's greys, isn't it?
Yeah, the greys is another one.
They've sort of they've reinvented that, didn't they? To little green men. Rather than little grey. Which was, I think, interesting. To do with that. And I mean, it's funny how they push this narrative, isn't it? The story of the alien invasion. In a lot of.
And I think if you think about it, I mean, I might be wrong, but I think War of the Worlds was the first one. On that, in that way, coming to the Earth with spaceships, like the mass invasion attack, wiping out everybody. There might have been alien visitation before that. I'm pretty sure there was, but in terms of the out and out big invasion, War of the Worlds was I think it was the first one. H.G. Wells.
I think so. I don't recall anything pre that.
No.
I know you had that one, what Jim Marr spoke about. I wouldn't say an invasion, but the evidence of, they said about a grave in Aurora, do with an alien body, in the 18 something, wasn't it? But no, I think War of the Worlds was
Mm, mm.
Probably the first, and they used to call them Martians then, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Martians.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's an interesting
yeah,
change of,
yeah, yeah.
how they
It
are.
was it was a commonly used term. Yeah, it's weird
Mm,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's quite different. I'm not sure I've use that word too often. Martians.
Mm.
You
It
know.
was. I think it was used a lot in the 50s, wasn't it? 40s
Yeah.
and 50s.
Yeah.
And that came off because it was used Martians in the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast. So,
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I think it was Martians was used in the H.G. Wells book as well.
Right.
So,
Right.
but you're right. It did shift after that. It did shift
Mm.
after that. It became more sort of generic, didn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Alien or the Little Green Men was used a
Yes.
lot, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Of course, then we obviously led on to ET,
yeah,
extraterrestrials and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Which I don't know if that fits more into around the lizard, with the I don't know. I can't quite fathom that out yet.
Mm,
All the
mm.
different types of the names.
Yeah, yeah,
Thinking
yeah,
about it now. I mean, I think it's interesting in this. I'm quite interested because I'm doing like yourself, a lot of research into this and blue beam and stuff like that.
hmm,
So I'm interested in why they chose the formal introduction, obviously the United Nations in New
yeah,
York.
yeah.
Now, so things like that stand out to me.
Mm, mm.
I think I like the analogy where the sunglasses sort of defines
Yes,
as to protect
yeah,
the light from the
yeah.
bright light. And the other thing, which I don't think we mentioned, is about the food,
Ah,
humans being food,
yeah.
because we do hear of that, don't we? About to
Hmm,
do with
hmm. Yeah, that word that we can't
children
use.
going missing and
Yeah,
things
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah,
and whether it's people being just completely vanishing and
yeah,
being
yeah,
abducted
yeah.
in the UFO field.
Hmm,
So I think there's quite a lot in that.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
when you go back to it in 1985, I mean, I would not have been aware, obviously as aware as I am now back
Mm.
then, you know. But I think that's interesting how they put that in there, that were
Yeah,
used for
yeah,
food,
yeah, yeah.
because there is
If
an
you,
element about that.
what about as well, like if you're talking about energy as food, because one of the
Mm.
shows that I'm always looking for people to talk about, but to talk to about it, but I don't very often come across people, is Twin Peaks. I don't know if you remember
Right,
Twin
yes,
Peaks,
yes.
and these entities that come through from other dimensions, like you got the Red
Mm.
Room and all this kind of thing in it. That little dwarf that dances backwards. I don't know if you
Yeah,
remember that from it. But one of the things that they do is like the evil entities in it. They feed on this stuff called like garum boja, they call it cream corn,
right, okay.
and it's and they say it's human suffering. They're eating human suffering. They feed on it like a
Oh, right,
vampirism
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing. And so I thought, in a way, it's kind of like that with V. I know they are actually saying we're actually using them as food,
yeah.
but in a way, they traumatize them when they take them up to the ship, don't they? They come in,
Mm.
sweep away the entire town, take all the people in the town and that, and
Yeah,
they've and there's like a trauma to it, isn't there?
yes,
And
yes,
I was thinking about how they say like in the farm industry when they slaughter animals and that for food and stuff like that, there's better ways of killing the animal, because
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
if you traumatize the animal before it's it doesn't. And I don't know, I don't know if you get where I'm coming from on that.
I do, yes, yeah, yeah. It does, yeah. Ties into, I think you're alluding to the I word.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that we
something
can't
that
talk about.
something you can't talk about,
And
and
a certain search engine.
yeah, 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 yeah.
And yeah. So, yeah, so I'm gonna have
I
to
got
use
that
the word
undertook.
belief. Yeah. I
Mm,
tend to think there's a lot of validity in that,
mm.
and why um people go missing,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
especially young people.
yeah.
I think there's a lot more perhaps that we don't know
Mm,
do with
mm.
that. But
No,
but just saying that, I was synchronistically again. I wasn't sleeping very good one night. Must have been about 7 years ago, and I just happened to wake up at the time, and I put the telly on when I had a telly then,
mhm,
and I it come on I think it's like a BBC channel. Can't remember what channel it was.
Right.
Anyway, they were talking about how they were using blood to try and prolong
Yeah.
and make people healthy and prolong life.
Yeah.
Which I thought was odd because it's the opposite of what they really want,
Yeah.
But I was shocked that they were talking about that in a way of, well, we can use this blood to actually rejuvenate people. That's what I think there is something in that, especially about getting them into at a certain state before the ultimate terrible act.
Absolutely.
In
the V narrative, it feels like there's a trauma element attached to it. I know it's never explicitly said in the story, but it does feel like, if you want to extend the analogy of our predator sometimes plays with its food before it eats it,
Yes,
it feels like that.
Yeah,
it feels
funny
like they're
enough,
almost tormenting them sometimes in V. It's like,
I think you're right about that. That never occurred to me until you've just brought that up. Actually, I'm honest.
Because they come and they say we're a friend's piece and all that, and it's like it's a slow build.
I don't know if you all like this. Some things really in the film you can go away and you haven't watched it for ages, but some things just stay in there
stick,
and never forget.
Yeah.
And it's not until you just get that little trigger about the letter.
Let's mention that actually before we round things up. Your experience with Diana eating the gerbil, because things don't always stick as you remember them.
So, no, and it wasn't just me who said it. Actually, yeah,
right, okay.
It's somebody else, partner, and that. So we rewatched V again, the whole lot over a couple of days, and obviously come to the it's a guinea pig, isn't it?
Yeah, I always said it was a guinea pig or gerbil. Something like that.
Well, that's funny because I thought it was a gerbil the first time.
Right, okay.
And then I heard it was a guinea pig.
Yeah.
So, but when we watched that particular scene where she puts the gerbil in her mouth, I don't remember it being that, that bad.
Because it's like lockjaw, isn't it? It's like,
comes out and does it. And I remember it looking more realistic. Like she literally swallowed a gerbil and the tail going in, and even the gerbil looked more realistic than what this one did on what we watched. And I thought that don't look right to how I remember it. It was a lot more convincing.
Strange though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I don't remember the jaw doing that either.
Wow.
It's like that. I can still picture where our old telly was years ago and watching it. And it was not like that for me.
I'm a big believer that these things happen sometimes where things, it's like a glitch in the matrix and something, I mean, some people call it the Mandela effect. I think it's a bit generic to call it that, but I think there's something to that phenomenon. There's been times where, like I say, I think I've said in the video with you, didn't I? I had a personal experience in my own life, 2016, but it happens to be quite a lot when I watch things. And it's not my memory. I know it's not my memory. I mean, my memory's not brilliant, but isn't that shit? Do you know what
I mean? I'd like to consider that I've got a good memory. Yeah,
I know why a lot of people hold V up. Not just because. I mean, it's a powerful story. Like we said, it's a cautionary tale, but it synchronizes with so many other areas as well, doesn't it? It really does.
It does.
Worth giving it. If you can get past the dodgy special effects in it,
I mean, did we just quickly mention? Did we mention the pregnancy with the alien baby?
We touched on it, but I don't think we got any. Go on then,
because that's an interesting one, isn't it? How they've done that too, which you do hear a lot of experiences.
Who
claim they've been abducted. They have like phantom pregnancies and the baby's gone and stuff like that. So I thought that was quite interesting how they brought that into V, because it's something we do hear a lot about people who claim they've been abducted, and women have been pregnant or tested pregnant, and all of a sudden things have changed. So I thought that was an interesting element, really.
And one of the things as well was when what was his name? Brian was the visitor that impregnated Robin. That was it.
Yes.
And when they do the deed, she sets him up and says it's an experiment.
I forgot
So
about that.
it's
Yeah.
like it's not just something that they just want to do for kicks, you know. It's
Yes.
an actual experiment, a crossbreeding experiment, you know, that she's.
So it's more or less pointing it there for you,
Yeah,
really.
it is. Yeah. It goes off the rails a bit in the final battle when she gives birth to the twins, that little green troll thing, and and then the Star Child, the daughter that saves them all at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that in the follow up. It kind of got derailed a bit.
I think I do. Yeah.
But Ken Johnson wasn't really involved with it at that point. Then he was only really involved with the first one.
Yeah, they had a bit of a fallout or something. Was it Warner
Yeah,
Brothers?
I think he wrote the. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Actually, for those people that are interested, let's just let me just quote, because people say what was his inspiration for. So yeah, let me just pull this up.
Oh,
he said,
I've got that.
Ken Johnson. Yeah, he says they burned the Reichstag, of course, and blamed it on people that could rally the cause. And I sort of used that, the idea of creating havoc and blaming it on someone else, so that you can then go and dump on somebody else, is something that that man from World War II mastered, and something I was anxious to have echo through this. My original screenplay had no aliens or anything like that in it. It was strictly a homegrown fascist takeover of the United States. Suddenly we were living in a different country. Suddenly we were in an occupation. Suddenly we're under martial law. I wrote this as a screenplay and I called it Storm Warnings. I was having dinner with Brandon Kartikoff, and he felt that the Americans might not get fascism.
Yeah.
Look, where did they go wrong there then?
Yeah.
I wanted to know if I could have it be a Soviet occupation. I didn't really believe that's either, so it became an alien invasion. And he said that back in the 1980s, I read a book called It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. It's a great book, by the way. People read that. Yeah. Really, really good book. I was intrigued by the notion because I felt there was a great complacency amongst American people that no real sea change could ever take place in their life. Again, from your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah.
V was particularly intended on social political allegory right from the very beginning. It also commented on people like the George Morphagon character. I think that was the Abraham's son, I think.
Yeah.
He wanted to just keep his hands over his eyes and pretend nothing was going on, even while his son was becoming a part of the Hitler Youth. Yeah. Corruption of power, played by David Packer in V. He was seduced by the power of the dark side, shall we say. So that was what inspired him. Towards the end of the miniseries, Abraham obviously gets taken on the mother. He doesn't come back. The son and his son and his daughter-in-law, they come back. Daniel's waiting for them. They said, "Where's Granddad?" And he's gone. And they read out a letter, don't they, that he's left behind. And it's Abraham's letter. He says, "We must fight this darkness that is threatening to engulf us. Each of us must be a ray of hope and do our part, and join with the others till we become a blinding light, triumphant over darkness. Until that task is accomplished, life will have no meaning. More than anything else, you must remember your side you're on and fight for it."
Yeah. That's
really,
sums it up really well.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. It's got a good feel-good element about that.
Yeah. I always say this at the end of all these videos when I do them. Please, people, go out there and watch it. Go and check it out, because it's worth it if you can get past the special effects, which are a bit cheesy nowadays by today's standards. But yeah, it's a really, really good story. It's worth taking the time to watch. And unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on, I'll just say thank you for joining me to talk about it, because it's been really interesting.
Thanks for asking me to do it. You know,
you're welcome,
we've
mate.
been meaning to do it for ages, haven't we, Carl? You know,
and I'm glad that we've
finally done it.
Yeah, I'm glad we've gone off on a few little tangents as well, because I'm always up for that. You know, just take it wherever it goes. It all kind of goes back together again in the end. Such as the way of this stuff, it kind of all melds together. Mark Conlon, blogspot.com on the blog and the YouTube channel. You've got lots of little snippets of videos on there as well, haven't you, from the past that people can check out and get an idea of all that kind of thing. It's really worth taking the time to look at, definitely. And I'll just say thank you again, mate. Really enjoyed
Carl.
it. It's been brilliant.
Appreciate it. I've enjoyed
Hopefully
it.
We'll do it again. Yeah,
definitely.
All right, you take care for now.
And you. All the best.
I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye-bye for now. Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness. Joining me for another episode of Insightful, I have a very special guest with me today, Mark Devlin. How you doing, sir?
Hello, mate. Yeah, quite tired, busy as ever. Always am. Lots going on.
Yeah, I'm traveling all over the place, haven't you? It's been fascinating watching what you've been up to.
Yeah, lately I've moved house, been to Las Vegas for a weekend, and been to Australia for a week. So if I look a bit tired and jet lagged, it's because I am. So all of that has been in a really short space of time. Got to move again in a few weeks as well. So yeah, it's all happening.
I'm sure our viewers and listeners will not mind, because it's about the content, isn't it, as opposed to
well, yeah, I was saying to you off air there that I like doing radio. I'm a sort of radio guy, not particularly happy about being in front of the camera, but I do it because it's required. And mainly I don't like going on the camera because I look so tired and disheveled all the time.
I think you look all right, mate. I think you look fine.
Okay, well,
So for anybody, if you're not, why are you not? But, if anybody who's not familiar with Mark Devlin's work, please go and check. I think his main central source is the website djmarkdevlin.com. And from there, you can check out his books. I did have all three of them, actually. Musical Truth 1, 2, and 3. I lent Volume 3 to a friend of mine, and I never got it back. So I've got to re-get that, repurchase that.
Well, funnily enough, yesterday I just released my latest book, which is this one.
Gift and
The Gift and the Curse. That's my truth fiction novel.
Yeah.
So the official release date for that was yesterday, which was 9th of November, 9/11.
Right.
So
that's a follow-up, isn't it, to is it The Curse and the Cure? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, please, people, check those out. Yeah, and check out Mark's Good Vibrations podcast as well. There's so much that you've got. There's just an absolute wealth of material there. Interviews, your own material as well, and
that's right.
I really encourage people. Absolutely, absolutely encourage people to check it out, because you'll not be disappointed, and it will really give you some interesting perspectives on the world if you're not already clued in on these things. So, which we very much need nowadays, don't we? We really do.
Well,
crazy times we live in.
It's a different world to the one that I used to live in. Going back 20 years, I was a full-time DJ. So I was going up and down the UK, playing gigs all over the place, internationally as well. And it's very similar to what I'm doing now, because I play gigs all over the place now, and I'm traveling internationally again. But now I'm delivering empowering information, truthful information, which is going to uplift and inspire people, hopefully. Yeah. Whereas back in those days, I was just dropping tunes in clubs, and it was all about parties and not a whole lot else. So my life is a bit more meaningful these days, at least.
I think it's one of those things where, because there is quite a degree of overlap, actually, in terms of the research that you do and the research I do. It's different specialities. Yours is music mainly, lots of other areas as well, but that's a specialized area. And with me, it's sort of like the movies and TV shows, and particularly science fiction.
As I see from your background.
Yeah. But there is a lot of overlap. Well,
there is,
And we quite often come across things, don't we? You and I have sort of sent things backwards and forwards to each other over the years, of things that we've come across. And that kind of nicely leads us into what we're going to talk about today as well. The film Metropolis from, I think it was 1927, wasn't it? And
that's right, nearly 100 years ago. Incredible.
Yeah. And the date that the film is set is 2026 as well, which is literally just around the corner for us now.
Well, I didn't actually realise that.
Yeah. It's interesting you saying about how things have changed, because certainly I think metaphorically, and in terms of fiction and things like that like the more things change, the more they stay the same in some respects, because there's a lot of things going on in this film which could be applied to the world we're living in today, I suppose, really. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the reason I wanted to talk about this particular movie, because it tells us so much about the times in which we're living now. And this is what I find so incredible, because it was made so long ago. And yet we recognize so many of the agendas being pushed, and the symbolism and the research that the likes of you and I and so many others have been doing in recent years. And it's all there. And it just indicates knowledge of subject areas that we're just getting into now in recent times, which were obviously there within so-called elite circles 100 years ago and way beyond that as well. So this movie came from Fritz Lang, the writer and director. He was a German occultist, so he was into, the works of famous occultists of the time. Esoteric studies and such. And also he was a Freemason. And so much of his sort of arcane occult knowledge was obviously encoded into this film.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah. And it was a monumental undertaking. This film took apparently 17 months to make, which is quite a long time for a movie. And when you look at it, you consider the amount of extras, the amount of people involved. That would have taken a hell of a lot of arranging and directing. So no wonder it took so long. And yeah, it's on an absolutely epic scale, which is all the more incredible for the time in which it was made.
Yeah.
It's got this futuristic cityscape, which is very reminiscent of the sort of things we're hearing about now. These so-called smart cities, part of the UN's Agenda 2030, 5G smart grid systems linked to social credit score arrangements, and everything linked via internet and such. These ideas were right there in that movie. You've got flying craft going around the high-rise buildings, and you've got these sort of high-speed motorways that look very similar to what we've got today. And apparently Fritz Lang was inspired by a trip to New York at the time.
He was, yeah.
And he was amazed by all these high-rise buildings in Manhattan. And so he sort of recreated his visions of New York in the cityscape for this movie. So it's very futuristic in its themes. It's got things like transhumanism which is a very major part of the plot, actually. So just to give a précis of what the film is about.
Please do, because some people might not be familiar with it.
Sure. So there are lots of different versions of it, actually. I think the original version was about 2.5 hours long. But as with so many movies, it's been chopped and butchered over the years, and you've got various different cuts where they've taken vast swathes of the narrative out. So if people want to watch it, try and track down the original cut, which is about 2.5 hours in length.
I think they restored most of it in 2008, didn't they? If I remember rightly. Yeah, I think it was. They got
there were various,
quite a lot of the old footage back, didn't they? Yeah.
Various restorations. There was some hidden, some lost footage, which was recovered, and it was quite damaged. But from the point of view of completism, it was sort of pasted back into the original cut. So for anyone that wants to see some of that lost footage, you can probably see that cut as well. So the basic overview is that you've got this futuristic cityscape. I didn't realize it was set in 2026, but you just enlightened me on that. That explains a lot, because it's similar to a lot of what's happening at the moment. And you've got an elite class, so-called, who live above ground in these amazing high-rise skyscrapers. And the creator of this city is a guy named Jo Fredersen. So he's like the ultimate elite guy who presides over this city. But then you've got the working class, the laborers, who are toiling away underground on machinery that keeps the city operating. And the city is entirely reliant on this workforce. And at the start of the film, you've got this very memorable scene where you've got one shift of workers about to clock on. And they've all got their heads bowed. They're just completely compliant and subservient. They look like they're completely devoid of spirit, because they're just in these mind-numbingly tedious, laborious jobs. And then another shift is just clocking off, and they're just coming out the elevator and walking the other way with their heads down. It's a very striking scene. And then you see what happens underground, which is all this machinery which causes the city to function. You've got the son of Jo Fredersen, who's this young guy. It's known as Freder. And he doesn't share his father's value system. So very early on, we see that he's someone with a conscience. He's someone with compassion, which gets awakened. And he's somewhat a disappointment to his father, because he doesn't represent those sort of so-called elite values that he has. And this young Freder guy comes across this saintly figure named Maria. And she's played by Brigitte Helm in a very memorable role.
Yeah.
Brigitte Helm was about 17 when they started filming, so she was 17 or 18 in these scenes. Looks a lot older. Actually quite a beautiful woman.
I think she was, yeah,
I feel, yeah. So she appears as Maria, and she's got this aura about her. She's almost this religious sort of type figure, and she represents love and compassion. And there's a tagline that runs throughout the movie, which is the mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart. So we've got some
interesting phrase, that, isn't it? Yeah.
Overtones going on there, yeah. And so she represents the mediator between the elite ruling class of this city and the working class. So Freda becomes fascinated by her, and he pursues her and eventually falls in love with her. But then his father gets wind of what's going on, and there's this secondary storyline involving this crazy inventor, this mad scientist. He's got the sort of wiry hair, and he looks like the stereotypical crazy scientist. And his name is Rotwang.
Rotwang, yeah.
Which translates as red cock, basically. I looked it up.
Yeah.
That's what it means. And it turns out that both Rotwang and Jo Fredersen were in love with the same woman, and her name was Hel, Hel. So there's probably some signaling going on. And she turns out to be the mother of Freda, but she died apparently giving birth to him. And both these guys were in love with this woman. So Rotwang, the crazy inventor, has made this robot, which is where we get into transhumanism. And we see an image, very striking image of this android type thing sat in a chair. And in the room is a bloody great pentagram on the floor.
Yes. Yeah.
A satanic pentagram. So that's a symbol that we're all sort of getting used to now. And there it was 100 years ago. And Rotwang's idea is that he's somehow transported the spirit or the soul of this woman Hel into what's known as the machine man. So this robot is called the Machine Man, even though it sort of embodies a woman.
Yeah.
And so Jo Fredersen asks Rotwang to create a version of this Machine Man, this android, based around Maria. So he wants to capture Maria's soul essence and transport it into this robot, and then to put the robot in among the workers, the working class, because they've learned of a potential rebellion among the workers. So the idea is to put Maria in there because all the working class look up to her and respect her and are in reverence to her. Yeah. But they want an evil version of Maria who leads them astray. And so when they create the robot version of Maria, she looks very different to the original Maria.
Oh, yes, definitely.
This one looks very dark, and she's got these dark circles around her eyes, like this eyeshadow type thing. And straight away, that made me think of a very dark subject area that many of us have looked into lately, which is adrenochrome. And we hear that with adrenochrome extraction, it often results in black circles around the eyes. So I don't know if that's what was being hinted at back then, but if it was, that's amazing because it means that agenda was going on in the 1920s. And she's got this thing, this sort of tick where one of her eyes keeps closing, the left eye keeps closing. I think there's some signaling going on there, maybe symbolizing the left-hand path or the left brain. So she just keeps winking with this eye with the black shadow and stuff, and that's how you know it's the robot version of Maria and not the original. So she gets sent into the workers below ground, and they all believe that she's the real Maria, and she incites them to rebellion. But what's happened is the mad creator Rotwang has got his own agenda, and he wants to topple or overthrow Jo Fredersen, the top guy in the city. And so he set this robot Maria off on her own agenda to destroy this machine, which is known as the heart machine. So that symbolizes the heart of the city. Without it, the city can't operate. And she incites the workers to destroy this machine. And it results in these underground areas becoming flooded, and everyone has to come up above ground, and children have to be rescued because they're in danger of being swept away by this flood. And all the time, Freda, this young guy, the son of the main guy in the city, is pursuing Maria, and he thinks that the robot Maria is the real one. The workers eventually turn on her, and they tie her to a stake and set her on fire. And Freda is horrified because he thinks it's the real Maria. But as she burns, and she's cackling away and laughing and just being completely maniacal, we come to see that it was actually a robot after all, and the workers realize that they've been duped. So I'll just pause there in case you want to jump in with any observations, but that's a basic overview of the plot line there.
It's a fascinating story, isn't it? It really is. It's like you say, there's the transhumanism thing there. Obviously, there's things that you pointed out about the imagery, the pentagram. I noticed quite a few of them, actually. There's, I think, mainly around sort of Rockwang's house. There's some of the lower level doors had got them on the doors as well. It was on the floor and on the wall behind the robot Maria as well.
There was some hand signaling going on as well.
There was,
triangle of manifestation of pyramid hand sign being made by Yo.
I mean, we can probably look at some of the symbolism first before we go off into any other areas, because I just thought some of it was fascinating. Some of the numerology in it as well, like just little things like you notice in the lift numbers and things like that. I kept finding multiples of 11s and 6s and things like that when you added up all the numbers of the lift numbers.
51? I think 51.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
Made me think of Area 51 in Nevada, this underground base.
Just like of course, obviously there's the machine, the Moloch as well. That's another big one, isn't it?
Yeah. We got a couple of dark themes really going on there. So that one, there's a point where Freda starts hallucinating and he's having these nightmarish visions, and he sees the heart machine turning into Moloch, this figure out of ancient mythology. To which children were evidently sacrificed. And he just has these terrifying visions of this machine turning into this entity.
And devouring the workers. It's
devouring the workers,
It's the ritual sacrifice, isn't it? And like you say, and of course the Saturn worship aspects of Moloch as well, that's all about ritual sacrifice as well. So
that's right.
Sorry,
And then a bit later in the movie, he's in bed because he's hallucinating, and he's sort of had to be like hospitalized, and he keeps waking up in bed with a start with these terrifying visions, and he's seeing Maria, who by this point is the robot Maria, having turned into the whore of Babylon. So she's representing that imagery.
I got a lot of notes on that.
There's biblical overtones. There's a lot of this esoteric spiritual imagery that we're all quite familiar with now. And again, it's just incredible to me that knowledge was being displayed almost a century ago, and very few in the film-going audience would have been familiar with this symbolism and known what it meant, I would suggest.
Probably not, no.
Only really high-level adept occultists with some very advanced knowledge would be able to recognize these themes. But they're all in there.
One of the things that I thought was interesting with the time and the sort of the cubism, the surrealism, the expressionism, sort of that art movement at that point in time, which is clearly in the film, isn't it? And Fritz Lang was clearly inspired by all that sort of style of doing things as well. And
Echo as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And I don't know how much you've looked into it. I mean, only a cursory for me, but sort of how certain elite types steered those art movements as well, of course, and moved so much of that symbolism into that esoteric occult symbolism into that sort of art movement.
It's 1927, but it's portraying a scene which looks very modern, very contemporary to these times. That city just looks like a city that we have these days. So I'm just astounded by how long ago that thing was made, and obviously everyone involved in it is now deceased. But what an incredible legacy was left behind. I'm not entirely sure what Fritz Lang's intentions were, whether it was to sort of uplift or educate humanity in some way and communicate empowering information, or whether it was some sort of occult mockery of the apparent profanity or ignorance of the masses, whether it was revelation of the method in some way, which they like to do, placing the truth in plain sight. I don't know what his intentions were behind putting that movie out. Evidently, it was a bloody pain in the ass to make. It took so long. It cost the equivalent of £21 million in today's money. And the studio must have been very frustrated with how long it was taking to get out.
I believe it bankrupted the company, didn't it? If I'm right, I believe it bankrupted the UAF, was it? The company that made it?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. It still stands up today. It's quite surprising, actually, in terms of how it looks. And it's undoubtedly, it's inspired things like Blade Runner and films like that, with the cityscapes and all that sort of, Going back to your point you're making about the what it was that he was trying to convey, I completely agree with you. All of those things. I think it's probably all of those things as well. But one of the things that I picked up on there was the socio-political thing as well. The timing of when it was being made in Germany, sort of just leading up to that point with Hitler and all that, that kind of thing. One of the fiercest critics of the time was the Communist Party in Russia, I think it was, because it was sort of ardently socialism aspect to it that was coming from it. I think you can see the socialism in it, can't you?
Well, you can, particularly in that opening scene where the working crowds are getting ready to log on for their shift, and they all look the same. They're all wearing these flat caps, which are very reminiscent of Soviet Russia. And it's quite communistic in nature in terms of what's being portrayed,
which is strange that the Communist Party would have been quite critical of it, so well, make of that what you would.
Close to the truth, maybe.
Absolutely. And,
what we've got portrayed there is exactly the same dynamic that we have in society today, which is
absolutely
a working class, effectively a slave class, subservient to the elite ruling class and completely reliant upon them. But then again, the elites are completely reliant upon the workers because they can't survive without them. But society in that movie is structured pretty much in the same way as it still is, because nothing's changed majorly. We've had movements, socialism and communism and whatever, fascism, whatever labels you want to put on it. But the same structure in human society is with us today, because it would take something very radical to ever change that.
When you look at the because one of the reason why I wanted to tie that to that as well was because I've noticed with a lot of the sort of, I don't like the term, but the sort of wokey type stuff that's around at the moment, as they call it, I'm not particularly fond of that word, but how a lot of that has got esoteric symbolism in it as well, that sort of extreme left socio-political thinking. There's a lot of esoteric, a lot of occult symbolism attached to that as well. So those things going hand in hand with Metropolis all that time back as well. So it's one of those things. It's always there, isn't it? It's
When you become symbol literate, you see this stuff everywhere. When you learn to spot these signs and symbols and sigils and icons and motifs, then you do tend to spot it. You can go back decades and watch old movies, and you're like, oh my days, look, they're just making a symbol there that I've only just learned about, and all those decades ago there it was. So there obviously was a very potent reason for this movie to get put out against all the odds. And as I say, we can puzzle as to what the true motives were, but it's just an incredible piece of work.
Absolutely. You mentioned before about the tagline, the mediator between brain and hand must be the heart. That midsection where it goes into sort of all the biblical stuff, and it ties in again to the Scarlet Woman, the Babylon ritual, all that kind of stuff, and the Tower of Babel comes into it as well. And of course, that was about people's inability to communicate with each other, which I thought was a fascinating idea in it as well, because you have these groups of people that, even though they're living together and they talk about the mediator, but they can't reach any common ground, can they?
Yeah, and that's a religious motif, a mediator. So you could take something like Christianity, and Christians are told that the only way to God, to heaven, to salvation is through Jesus, the figure of Jesus. So he's the mediator. And it's the same thing with many other religions, you know, Krishna in Hinduism and such. And when there's this talk of the mediator between the head, which is represented in the movie by the elite class, Jo Fredersen, and the hands, which are the workers, being the heart, it made me think of the middle way that we hear of in Buddhism. You know, supposedly Buddha taught that the way to salvation is the middle way, to walk that middle path. I remember watching the movie Little Buddha with Keanu Reeves many years ago. Great movie.
Good film,
Taught me a lot about, you know, Buddhist beliefs. And I just remember that talk of the middle way. And that seems to be something else that's getting conveyed here with the idea of the mediator. The interesting thing about the robot Maria, or the machine man, is that it's inspired so many music artists. And it's almost as if every major pop artist of the last 15 to 20 years has at some point appeared in robotic form, android form, very much based around the machine man out of Metropolis. Madonna's done that. Beyonce has appeared on stage as this robot thing. Lady Gaga, I think Britney Spears has done it. It just seems to be a prerequisite of being a successful pop artist now. So again, that's another lasting legacy of this movie, just that android idea. And it was very clearly communicating transhumanism. You know, Rotwang is transferring the soul energy of Maria into this android thing. Interestingly, she still survives, so she doesn't die. You still have the genuine original, Maria, who survives to the end of the movie. But you've also got this robot version of her where her likeness has been transported in it. And that's the central idea of transhumanism, you know, the marrying together of humanity and machinery, technology. So those ideas were around almost 100 years ago. And maybe that's why we see so many depictions of this android robot from Metropolis, because this is a very big agenda that's being pushed now. AI, transhumanism, this total reliance on technology to do everything. It's a major part of the elite agendas, and it clearly has been for a very long time.
Interesting you mentioning about those particular pop stars as well, because as you and I know, there's a lot of allusions to sort of mind control and triggers and things like that. And I thought about the two, you know, the robot and the original Maria, the real Maria, and it's almost like alters the way you described it before. The expressions, it's almost like a dissociate, you know, different personalities, that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, it is. So you've got the two versions of Maria. And there are allusions there, as you say, to mind control, where you've got dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. You have these alters that are created as a result of MK Ultra style mind control experimentation, trauma-based mind control. So that seems to have been a theme in it as well. So you've got these two different versions of Maria. I actually found the sort of the bad Maria to be quite attractive and sexy, actually, which is it's probably a dark, twisted side of me coming through. But yeah, I did find her quite attractive, Brigitte Helm. She was quite interesting because she went on to have loads and loads of car accidents. She was reportedly a really bad driver. And there was one incident where she reportedly killed somebody in a road accident, and she got off, but you know, really terrible driver. And she didn't do many films after Metropolis. She grew very disillusioned with the Nazi Party, which was gaining momentum in Germany in the 1930s. And she felt that the film industry of the time was very strongly linked to the Nazi Party. She had no part in it. So she kind of stepped away from the industry, didn't do many films, didn't do many interviews beyond that. But yeah, very interesting woman.
Similar thing happened with Fritz Lang as well, didn't it? Because he, they loved his stuff and they wanted to use it for propaganda. Obviously, he left and went to America, you know.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know what happened to him after that.
I can't remember when he died. I think it was in the 70s, something like that. 1976, I think, something like that. So, yeah, his career kind of... But even so, you know, I mean, after the fact, there's some strange films. I don't know if you've ever seen M. the one with Peter Lorre, the child killer.
No, haven't seen that.
Very, very dark film. I won't go into too much detail because obviously this will go up on YouTube, and YouTube doesn't like certain subjects being talked about. But yeah, that is a very dark and disturbing film. That's a Fritz Lang one. I think that was 1933. So
yeah, I don't know much more about what else he did. You're obviously way more clued up on movies than me. I'm someone that I do love movies, but I'm very picky about the ones that I choose to watch. I'm not a big fan of blockbusters. I'm not a big fan of science fiction, to be honest. I just don't get inside most of it. But every now and again, I just find a film that absolutely captivates me and fascinates me, and I study it endlessly. And I dearly love films like that just have that special something about them. And Metropolis definitely fits the bill. I first saw it many years ago, didn't understand the symbolism, but there was just something special about it. I knew that it had been used by Queen in the video
Radio Gaga,
Radio Gaga, so maybe we should get into the music side of things.
Can do,
yeah. So I remember watching the video to Radio Gaga by Queen, which came out in early 1984, of all years, go figure, from their album The Works. And The Works makes me think of, that underground machinery that was there in the city. And they've got a track on that album, actually, called Machines and Back to Humans. And it's about transhumanism.
So in
the video to Radio Gaga, which was the first single from that album, you've got the group, Queen, transposed into scenes from Metropolis. So they're in this flying craft, sort of going around the city, flying around these skyscrapers and stuff. And evidently the group was very into the movie Metropolis. My studies into Queen have demonstrated to me that the driving force behind that group was Brian May.
He was the big science. Yeah, he was a big science fiction fan as well. So
well, he's an astrophysicist, so-called these days. Reincarnation of Sir Isaac Newton, I think, looking at him. But Brian May was always the driving force behind Queen. And I've put together a presentation, actually, which I've not delivered yet. I was supposed to do it in Newcastle the other week, but I haven't done it publicly yet. And it's called Dark Occult Aspects of Queen. So I've really gone into that group. And it would appear that they were quite fascinated by occult ideas. And I think most of this was coming from Brian May. So Brian May appears to be the one that was very much into the ideas being put forward by Metropolis, and it was probably his idea to base the video around that. So that same year, 1984, there was a new soundtrack to that movie that was made by Giorgio Moroder. So the original Metropolis was a silent movie. It had captions in German, but you can also get a version where it's translated into English. But then there was a music soundtrack put to it in 1984 by Giorgio Moroder, this amazing Italian producer who worked out of Munich. He was the producer of Donna Summer's I Feel Love, which was a landmark piece of work.
Great piece of music, whatever people might say about Giorgio Moroder. And
he was an amazing musician, great producer. And he put together this soundtrack which featured Freddie Mercury. There was a song called Love Kills, which came out later that year, and it had Adam Ant and various other contemporary artists at the time. And so Metropolis was kind of restored, and there was a color version of it with this new soundtrack added, and Queen were a part of that whole project. So I think that's the first time I came across it, actually, in 84.
It was with me as well. I distinctly remember seeing it being shown at school. So I'm giving my age away a little bit now. I think it was about 9, something like that. I remember it. They put it on at school for us this one day, end of term type thing or something like that. And it was the colorized musical version. Right. That would have been my first exposure to it as well. Yeah.
That's right, because I was into Queen at the time, and I liked that Freddie Mercury track, and I heard about this Giorgio Moroder soundtrack, and I was like, oh, what's this movie? So that must have been the first time I saw it. And there's just been different versions of it. And as I say, it's inspired many music makers as well, because the scenes from Metropolis, and there's ideas and themes which have cropped up in many music videos over the years, particularly that robot android thing.
Absolutely. I wonder as well if we might talk a little bit about, because It's just an area that I'm fascinated in, but it's also an area that you probably have a lot of insight into as well, is the ritual of the Scarlet Woman, the Babylon work and all that, which is heavily talked about in Metropolis, isn't it? And the illusion is that the bad Maria is like the evocation of the Scarlet Woman as well, riding in on the beast with the 8 heads, is it, and all that kind of thing,
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated with that because of the whole Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard out in the desert doing their rituals based on Crowley stuff, and as a sci-fi fantasy guy as well, love my Twin Peaks, and that's David Lynch's thing, and that's all about that kind of stuff as well, but it's really heavily there with all these pop stars, isn't it, as well, and the music, that whole thing.
Well, I guess the evocation of the Scarlet Woman there, the Whore of Babylon, was the equivalent from those times of what we get now with these big music events like the US Super Bowl halftime show, the Grammys, the MTV VMAs. Those events in these times have become mass energy harvesting occult rituals. They're watched by millions and millions of people around the world, and they get more and more occult and satanic with every passing year, if you know what you're looking for.
They do,
and every time you think they've taken it as far as they possibly can and get away with it, they go even further the next year. Just look at Sam Smith's performance at the Grammys this year. It's a blatant display of Satanism. But if you think about what was getting portrayed in Metropolis, that was going out to the audiences of the time, which would only have been a fraction of the numbers that we now have. But anyone going to the cinema in the 1920s to watch that movie was witness to these occult rituals, and they were giving their attention to it. And that's one of the reasons why they do these things, because energy goes where attention flows. If you've got millions of people directing their consciousness towards a particular scene or a particular idea or a particular theme, there's a belief that you can actually help to manifest that and bring it into physical reality within occult traditions. And so that would have been the contemporary version of what we now see at things like the Super Bowl and all the rest of it. Of course, now you've got millions and millions more people that watch these things and are having their energy zapped unbeknownst to them. And are also possibly having their consciousness and their creativity exploited to bring about certain ideas.
No doubt whatsoever. Absolutely with you on that one. Yeah, no doubt whatsoever. Yeah. That thing of the imagery, though, just alone the imagery with the ritual going on. I think several years back, you and I came on your Good Vibrations podcast, and we talked about the 2012 Olympics, the ceremonies and that. And when I did my book about that, and I put in all the how many times you see people dressed up in the red garb, Annie Lennox coming in on a barge of the dead, and Rihanna dressed in the red, all they do. It's so blatant, isn't it?
Well, the 2012 Grammys was where Nicki Minaj exorcised Roman Zelensky, this entity that she said lived within her. She said it's this homosexual male. Roman Zelensky, obviously based around the film director Roman Polanski, but very disturbing because it hints at entity attachment, demonic possession. And Nicki Minaj appeared on stage with this guy dressed as the Pope and was said to be performing this exorcism. Hang on a minute. Wasn't that supposed to be about entertainment? Aren't the Grammys and all these music shows supposed to be about, just fun? So why are we getting dark occult rituals being portrayed on stage in front of millions of people? Well, it's because it's not about fun and entertainment, as we know.
Not at all.
Agendas at play here. But yeah, that was disturbing enough, and that was 2012. To think how much further they've taken everything since then. It was very interesting hearing you reference Metropolis being based in 2026. We're obviously very close to that now. And it made me think of the movie Soylent Green.
Oh, yeah, that's
obviously.
I think that's set around about now as well.
That
not exactly when, but
was made in 1973, so it's much more modern than Metropolis. I think the book came out in the 1960s. The film was made in 1973 with Charlton Heston. And interestingly, the storyline to it was set in 2022.
Right. I knew it was about now, but I wasn't sure exactly when.
Yeah. So the idea was that it was set in New York, and it had become overcrowded, overpopulated. People were living in extreme squalor. There was an extreme shortage of food, and there was an extreme disparity between the elite ruling class and the workers, the regular folk.
Which is when you want some of this stuff.
Oh, well, maybe not actually.
Or not, as the case may be.
I'd give that one a swerve.
No.
Yeah,
you're right.
Spoiler alert for anyone that's not seen the movie. You might want to dip the volume now, but the classic line from it, from Charlton Heston at the end, is "Soylent Green is people." So they're using dead bodies.
I mean, all joking aside. Yeah, it's
as a food source, and it's set in 2022. And back in 1973, it was depicting this nightmare, futuristic, dystopian society. Has there ever been a futuristic movie where the society isn't dystopian? Have you ever seen a futuristic movie where there's joy and abundance and happiness and everyone's loving life? Doesn't really happen, does it?
Not very often. I mean, even the ones that you could sort of call utopian, like maybe some aspects of Star Trek, even that's got a lot of violence with all the other alien races and things like that. So it's hardly like a complete out and out utopia. So I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is I've just written this book, and during the process, I just came to realize that the most gripping, the most thrilling stories that are really going to hold an audience's attention are ones where the characters are in extreme peril, where there's danger, where there's violence, where terrible things happen. They are the most interesting stories. If you try and make a story interesting when it's all about love and abundance and peace and happiness, I don't think it would make for a very interesting story. So
that's strange you saying that, because I am actually one of the very few people in the world who's the opposite to that. I am really, I will watch things like that, but I generally tend to watch them more sort of for research purposes or looking for the symbolism. I probably have got a few examples of those types of things that I do like, but yeah, I've always been sort of more into the peaceful, happy clappy.
Oh, well, that's good.
Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just me,
Most people seem to like the death and the destruction and carnage and chaos. But with that story, I mean, not to deviate too much.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
With that book, I wanted to ultimately end it on a positive, uplifting note. I didn't want violence everywhere and death everywhere. So what I've tried to do is dish out natural law, karmic consequences to each of the characters. So I think at the end of the story, most readers would agree that every character gets what they deserve based on their chosen behaviors and actions.
Right.
So that's what I've tried to do with that story. But anyway, that's an aside.
That's good. Yeah. I'm all for that. Yeah.
So
that whole thing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. What were we talking about? Soylent Green.
And we're talking about those films that are set in that sort of that paradigm, the dystopian future. Yeah.
Around these times. So they were putting a year on it, and they were saying this storyline is taking place in the 2020s. And here we are. So I remember in Soylent Green, food was so scarce, they've come up with this food sort of synthetic like supplement thing, which is dead bodies, as we'd said. But there's a scene where this guy, I think is it Charlton Heston's cop character? He takes a spoon of strawberry jam.
Oh, yeah. We sit with Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah. It's an absolute delicacy just to have a spoon of strawberry jam because only the rich can afford that. And so that's the nightmarish future that was predicted. And then you've got Edward G. Robinson, who volunteers to go into this euthanasia program. Where you get these few moments of absolute pleasure and bliss before you bow out of this world. And then they end up using the bodies. But that was a pretty dark element.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's quite interesting how a lot of these films that we were talking about, whether they were sort of set late 60s, early 70s, early 80s even, they tend to sort of fall around about now. in terms of their prediction dates, don't they? I mean, it's like Blade Runner. I think is 2019. I think that was predicting that.
Absolutely.
And that's another one has got the scarcity thing as well, because no one can have real animals. They're all artificial animals, like the replicant humans, which is transhumanism as well. And I think there's a conversation in the film about, do you think I'd be able to afford a real animal? That kind of thing. Yeah. So again, it's that idea, isn't it?
I think there might be some good news here in that these filmmakers were obviously very clued in. People like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, they know the score. They know what the agendas are. Stanley Kubrick knew what was going on. I personally feel that Kubrick was trying to wake humanity up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think he was an exception to the rule. Yeah, I think there are a few exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I think Kubrick was pretty upset with the so-called elite ruling class. He never really joined their ranks. He was always on the periphery of it. And there's a lot in his movies to suggest that he was trying to communicate what their agendas were. I personally feel that he was knocked off. They got rid of him when Eyes Wide Shut was about to be released. And we hear that there was 20 minutes of footage that was cut.
That's right.
Nobody's ever seen. And seemingly he just went too far. And they thought, no, we can't have this guy around anymore communicating this stuff.
Yeah.
But most of these filmmakers know what the agendas are.
Oh, yeah.
I think that, as you said, so many of them are set in these times, the 2020s, and they probably did feel at the time as if society would be very close to the sort of things being portrayed in these movies. And the fact that we are some way away from that still is possibly some means for optimism, because it may be in some way we've managed to stem the tide and we've managed to push back on these things, because I personally feel that these elite agendas, so-called, should be much further on than they currently are, according to their plans, according to documents they've put out, and particularly according to the clues they've put into TV shows and movies. I think they considered that by 2023, on the cusp of 2024, we'd be a lot closer to what we've seen portrayed in many of these movies. And, we're not.
The pushback has, I undoubtedly, the pushback has derailed some of it. Maybe delayed. I want to try and be optimistic about it and say that it's derailed it as opposed to delayed it. Yeah.
Look, mate, I mean, I've just got back from Australia. I got into Australia without a hitch. I did 4 talks communicating the information that I talk about, and I got back out again. In 2020, that was impossible.
Yeah, and you probably didn't think it ever would be possible at that point in time.
In 2020, I thought, well, that's it. I'm on British shores for the rest of my life because I'm never going to be able to travel again. But I did. And I think that's only because there's been pushback. There's been resistance. If everyone had sat on their asses and just put up with it, I mean, many did. But if everyone unfortunately, then we'd be in a very terrible state by now. And I think the fact that we've still got some relative freedoms of movement is testament to the power of large numbers of people pushing back and making a very clear statement that they're not having it, because these elite agendas are becoming very obvious now.
Oh, yes.
It's in their own writings. It's in their own documents. They feel the need to communicate it, not just symbolically in movies, which they love to do, but they actually come right out and tell you what they're doing. Schwab put a bloody book out telling you about how he wants to enslave you. I think so many people have got wise to this now that it has created a significant resistance. And those who have been pushing back have actually saved the hides of all the bloody masses that have sat around doing nothing, and they don't even realize it.
No, they don't know. No.
They don't even realize what a terrible
think crazies and
what a
conspiracy
terrible place
theorists
they would be in if all of us had done nothing, and they probably never realized that.
So is there anything else you wanted to throw onto the table maybe before?
Well, not really. I think I've mentioned all the main themes that I wanted to in the movie. I just recommend that everyone watches it. Anyone that's got an interest in occult studies, arcane knowledge, symbolism, and themes that we're seeing getting expressed in society now should just take a look at this movie and just consider how long ago it was made, what knowledge was quite clearly there, and maybe watch it in two goes because it's a long movie, you know, and just really study it. And I just think everyone owes it to themselves to
absolutely, yeah. What I shall do as well, because there's lots of other little things that I picked up as I was watching it, but I'll throw some images up on this video as well when I edit it, so people can have a look at, maybe if we don't necessarily mention them, but at least people can sort of intuit what it's about. I noticed little things like in the cathedral where Maria's doing her sort of sermon, and there's like the shape of an eye, an all-seeing eye behind her, made out of the shapes of the candles, little things like that as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Mark, for coming on and doing this. I really appreciate it. It's
yeah, no worries. That was a different kind of conversation for me, because normally I speak about music and how entertainment has been weaponized and such. I don't really get into movies much, but I really enjoyed the conversation. It was really
thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you did. Yeah, it's I have as well. Yeah, definitely. It's been a great discussion, and I hope people will get something out of it. And again, if people want to check out Mark's stuff, please go and visit djmarkdevlin.com. Is there anything else that you've got coming up at the moment that you want to let people know about, or anything like that?
Well, if I may be allowed another shameless plug.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I've just put this out, and it's the sequel to the novel that I published in 2019, self-published, The Cause and the Cure. So it's many of the same characters. The original story was set in the early 90s in Oxford, which is where I grew up. And of course, the 90s was the best decade of all, just incredible times. But this story is set in 2001, so it's 10 years on, and it's against the backdrop of the 9/11 attacks. And the characters discover that there's a plot to have Oxford's very own 9/11 event. That's the overall theme of the book. I really enjoyed the process of writing fiction. So I've written 3 non-fiction books, but I have discovered that I enjoy writing novels more because you can really explore your own imagination. You can literally have anything happen that you want to happen. You can put any words that you want into the characters' mouths. And the greatest thing about it is there's plausible deniability. So I call it truth fiction. So in these books, there's a whole load of truth bombs, and it all checks out. But if anyone ever challenged me on it and said, what are you doing making these crazy claims? You can't say that. I can say, well, chill out, man. You know, it's fiction.
It's a work of fiction. Yeah.
But actually, you're giving people a great deal of empowering truth dressed up as fiction, which is a great way to do it. I mean, that's what they do in the movies, right?
It is. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, you turn on the BBC Evening News, you think you're getting truth. All you're getting is lies and deception, propaganda. Then you go to the cinema and you think, oh, this is wild escapism and imagination. And actually, you're getting programmed. You're getting told the truth.
I think it's the occult reversal. I absolutely do. I think it's the occult reversal. You know, what they tell you is the truth is the lie, and what the lie is the truth. You know, it's
So they put all kinds of truths in movies, and usually it's for, I would suggest, not entirely benevolent purposes.
There are some exceptions, like we say, Kubrick and people like that, you know. But
I think in a lot of cases they're mocking us, they're rubbing our noses in it, they're telling us what's coming. So I've put a lot of truth in my novels, but my truth is supposed to be empowering and uplifting, and it's helpful to people.
That's good.
It's benevolent in its intent. So that's why I enjoyed the process of it so much. I would love it to be made into a film. That would be awesome, but it's probably never going to happen.
You never know. Never say never.
All right. Other than that, thanks for getting me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll do it again at some point. Yeah. And if I do manage to get this video edited in time, I will just say that if you're in my neck of the woods, Mark will be speaking in Lichfield at the Social Club on Wednesday the 15th. Yeah.
Kicking off at about 7 p.m.
Yeah. Hopefully I will try and get it edited in time and get it up before then. But is it that the talk is the occult aspects of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones? Is that right?
Yep. So I've got 2 talks, dark occult aspects of the Beatles and dark occult aspects of the Rolling Stones. So I've kind of started this series. As I say, I've just done the one on Queen, and I'm probably going to go band by band for the rest of my natural life.
Okay. Please go over to Mark's channel, like, share, subscribe and that on YouTube. Mark Devlin, is it? Just Mark Devlin, the channel called?
It's DJ Mark Devlin.
DJ Mark Devlin, right. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking more of the YouTube channel as well and things like that. But you've obviously got platforms on BitChute and Odyssey as well.
Yeah, I mean,
like
I've had 3 YouTube channels deleted.
Yeah,
I'm on my 4th, so I use BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble.
Okay, so there's
those.
all that there. Yeah. Okay then.
All right.
Right, great stuff.
Carl.
You take care of yourself. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching as well. And I will see you again very, very soon. Bye bye for now.
Cheers.
Hiya folks, Carl James here from Electric Media Madness, joining me for another insightful, very special insightful today, because this is one of my favourites, and I am joined by my very special guest, Kieran Woodhouse. How you doing, mate?
Very good. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Yeah. This is a rare treat for me, but we'll get into why in a minute. Before we do that, I just want to tell our viewers and listeners about your research. You're a paranormal investigator and researcher. You're an author of a number of books, An Introduction to Paranormal Investigation and Experiences of a Paranormal Investigator. You also host the Paranormal Paradigm podcast, the 3 Ps, and the Collective Conspiracy Show. There's an excellent documentary, which I highly recommend checking out as well, called Haunting in Essex. You also co-run the Free Thinking Society. They have a number of regular meetups and guest speakers in the Stourbridge area. So if anyone wants to check that out, I did a talk back in August there as well. So please help them, support them as well. Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to plug before we get going? Anything you want to mention to people that you do or anything like that?
No, you've done a good enough job there.
So I highly recommend people check out all that stuff, because it really is worth taking the time to look at. Now, normally, when I come across paranormal investigators and researchers, I'm very open-minded, but very, very sort of like at arm's length. But recently, I looked into your stuff, and there was 2 things really, which is why I wanted to talk to you about. I am really on the same page with you with this, how you've interpreted a lot of the phenomenon that goes on. This isn't just paranormal stuff, isn't it? This is like UFO type stuff as well, and things like that. Yeah. So we can come to that in a second. But also, and I don't think you actually mentioned it, but in looking at that, listening to you speaking, I thought, bet this guy likes Twin Peaks, And then when we met up, you was like, I bleeping love Twin Peaks, So I thought, right, that's it. Got to get him on. Because
it's I think the stuff that I tend to look into, there are paranormal guys out there that do, but there's a lot of people that are very old school, ghosts are just dead people type of theorists. So they don't tend to kind of explore the things that I look at.
Okay. So what I was thinking maybe was, if you could, it's very difficult to sort of condense it down initially just for people before we get into the Twin Peaks stuff, because we can tie all that in then as well. And if you want to just give people a general idea of that where you are with that, basically, if it's possible to do that.
Explain my theories.
Yeah. I mean, we can always broaden it out as we go on.
That's a show in itself. I mean,
I will really put some links in the description for videos that you've done talks about as well. So
I guess my foray into the paranormal world came about from my interest in the nature of reality. Was always my main interest, and I was always into UFOs more than I was ghosts, and a lot of synchronicity happened that kind of pushed me down the paranormal way. But I still maintain a huge interest in ghosts and the nature of reality and conspiracies and stuff like that. So I think what that did is it allowed me to look at the paranormal world from a different angle. And like I just said, there's a lot of people that are very strict that ghosts are dead people and it can't be anything else. And they're not really willing to come outside of their comfort zone. So I started looking at it from the nature of reality, and frequencies was my introduction really. So I think at the time, and I know that it's changed now. Scientists have actually realised that it's much smaller, but at the time it was 99.95% of the room that we're in we can't see or interact with. So it's 0.05% what we call visible light. So there's 99.95% of the room that you're in now, Carl, that you can't see or hear or interact with. But does that mean that there's nothing there? Or absolutely not. And I always use the analogy of a radio station. So if you're listening to Radio 1, you're tuned into that frequency range, and that's what you're hearing. It doesn't mean that Radio 2 doesn't exist. It does. It's just that you're not tuning into it. The second you change and tune into Radio 2, that doesn't mean Radio 1 doesn't exist. It's still there. You can't see it, you can't hear it. So there's all this stuff going on around us. And I think sometimes when you're experiencing something to do with a ghost or a UFO or a cryptid, it could be that you've listened to 2 radio stations at the same time and you're tuning into both frequencies, our world and one of their worlds. And I think that's what mediums can do or what psychics can do. And you're almost lifting the veil slightly to see what's going on. And then just like your car radio will kind of, you might have it where it fuzzes around and you get 2 songs playing at the same time and then it fixes itself. I think that's what happens. So people will say the UFO disappeared before their eyes, or Bigfoot walked behind the tree but didn't come out the other side. He did come out the other side. It's just that you're not tuned into that frequency anymore, so you can't see it. Same with the UFO. It didn't just disappear. It's still there. You're just not tuning into it anymore.
Yeah.
So I brought that kind of thought process into the paranormal world. And it's amazing when you don't just put yourself onto a little postage stamp in terms of a theory. It's amazing what you can find out and what you can explore and theorize. So instead of just saying, right, yes, all dead people, all ghosts are dead people, I'm now saying, well, actually, where I'm at currently with my theory, because it's ever changing, is that I at the moment don't think that they are dead people at all. I think it's a collective consciousness, a form of energy. And people are almost manifesting their own hauntings, because if we create our own reality, which I believe we do, then we create our own hauntings. And as people will see if they watch that documentary you mentioned, the more hauntings that I begin to investigate, the more I begin to realise that there's always something going on in the background. There's negative energy, which is very Twin Peaks based actually. But there's this kind of there's this negative energy, and all those teenagers going through puberty or adolescence, and there's arguments between the mum and the dad, and that's when they have the height of their activity. And if they stop arguing, or if they, go on holiday and spend time in a happy place, then they don't get any activity. And then the second they start to put out negative thoughts, they get the activity again. So I'm at a point now where I think a lot of hauntings are manifested. That's not to say that the experiences aren't real, because the people are clearly experiencing something, but they're being manifested by those people. So that's a, like I say, it's a show in itself, but that's kind of a shortened
like a
version
snapshot.
of
That's great. Thank you for that. It can be very disturbing for some people, because like you say, people are very pigeonholed into certain ways of thinking. I think a lot of it's been around for a long time in that way of thinking as well, so it's very hard to break that. Certainly where religion's concerned, you're talking thousands of years of indoctrination, aren't you, into certain belief systems and that. So it doesn't mean to say that we should necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. No. There's other ways that we can interpret these things. And very rarely does any of this, particularly in mainstream religion, I find, the whole thing of energy and consciousness is like, no, don't look at that. Don't look at that. It's like because that empowers people. It's something that it's.
That's right. You're seen as some kind of hippie, spiritualist, new age type person if you begin to talk about consciousness and stuff like that. And again, and I'm not the first person to be looking at this kind of thing. Just want to throw that out there. I've not pioneered this. People like John Keel and stuff have been doing this kind of thing for years. David Icke, I guess, to a degree. But like the problem is that, like you say, so people are so ingrained in their beliefs. I've been kicked out of ghost investigations because on a Ouija board I've asked, have you met God? And someone's gone, you can't ask that. And it's like, well, why? Like, is that not one of the ultimate questions? Is that not one of the ultimate questions? We want to know if there is a God. I don't really care if this thing's a boy or a girl, or if he wants to hurt us and all this generic rubbish. I want to ask, if we're supposedly talking to this entity, this energy, then I want to ask important questions, questions that we don't have answers to. So, but again, this is difficult for some people to get their heads around, and they can't comprehend it. And as we've seen in society over the last few years, shall we say, that when people's belief systems or comfort zones are attacked, then their backs come up and they lash out.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
fight or flight reaction, isn't it?
a
It's
fight or flight. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Their comfort zone is under attack, and they don't like it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I've again worked with a lot of people who always change evidence to fit their theory, which I think is wrong. You need to be changing your theory to fit the evidence.
Yeah.
And I think in order to do that, you can't be personally attacked. You can't, have you think that your belief system is being attacked. It's got to be fluid. I welcome these kind of attacks. I welcome people telling me that there's something wrong with a particular point of my theory, because that's how I evolve.
Yeah.
If I laid it down right now and said that this is the answer, this is everything to do with the paranormal, then I'd be an idiot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are people out there that do that.
They do. The same with the ufology as well, and all.
Yes.
Well, technically, it's all really under that banner of paranormal as well. As a lot of people would say it isn't, but yeah, I think it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, so there's an argument that I get into with a lot of ufologists, because within UFOs, there's the nuts and bolts guys who think it's a physical craft who's come from a different planet, and then you've got the interdimensional guys who believe that they're here amongst us. We just can't see them, as I said earlier. I'd probably fit more into the interdimensional camp, obviously.
I do as well. Actually,
yeah. But there's these guys that they actually fight each other about this kind of thing. They argue with each other, and actually, if they listen to each other's point of view, they might find that they've got more in common, and they might find that they've got the missing piece that helps
to take it further forward. Absolutely,
it further forward. Yeah,
I thought maybe we could at that point then tie it into Twin Peaks. Really, again, is maybe just like give people, before we dive in, a capsule idea of what Twin Peaks is all about, and that's another hard one to do, isn't it?
Yeah,
because on the surface it looks like a general murder mystery whodunit initially. It's really much more than that.
I'm trying to think how I've unsuccessfully got people to watch Twin Peaks.
Right.
The only person I know the only person I know who's watched Twin Peaks was my wife, and that's because we watched it together.
Yeah,
there are other people who I've said watch this, and they've watched the first couple of episodes, and then they tune out, and they don't quite go with it. So when I'm trying to sell it to them, I'm trying to think, what do I tell them? What do I tell them it's about? The problem is, I think I lose them when I start talking to them about tulpas and interdimensional time travel.
Tulpas and doppelgangers and
So,
voodoo and rituals in the desert.
Rituals in the desert, yep. So, I mean, it's essentially a murder mystery. A murder mystery, a guy comes in to solve a murder mystery, and it then transgresses into this kind of time travel, doppelgangers, alien, paranormal type thing. That's it, really. I can't. I mean, for me, if you're a fan of, the important thing to point out is that it's David Lynch, so it's incredibly surreal. It is incredibly surreal, and what you're seeing isn't always necessarily what it's trying to portray, if that makes sense. It's not black and white. Well, episode 8 is, but it's not black and white in the sense that they're, God, can we get into it this early? I mean, for me, Twin Peaks was something that David Lynch was. It was almost an anti-TV program that he made at the time, because the TV programs at the time, early 90s, were your kind of your Columbos, your
procedurals, weren't they?
A 45-minute program where there's a murder. No one really cares about the person that's been murdered because you've only got 45 minutes. So there's no kind of deep dive into the person's feelings or the effects that it's had on the family or the friends. And then within 45 minutes, there's a murder. The police have captured that person. They get arrested or killed, and it's all wrapped up with a nice little bow. And then you move on to the next one next week, and you forget about everything that just happened the week before. So David Lynch created this program where, at the base of it, yes, it's someone's been murdered and some guy's got to try and solve it, but that becomes a background issue. It focuses on the effects of all the other people, and what effect has it had on that girl's parents, and what effect has it had on her friends and with her school friends, and it comes, and it's almost like he draws it out, and we can get maybe into a bit about how he was made to reveal the murderer, but he draws it out and he draws it out almost as sticking two fingers up to the TV programs of those days. if you're like a modern audience where you need to know who done it within 45 minutes, then Twin Peaks isn't for you.
No.
If you like some really good storytelling, some kind of paranormal, surreal intrigue, then give it a go.
Yeah. I think when apart from maybe like the soaps and things like that, it was probably the first time that the long form storytelling had been done. Which a lot of the shows subsequently went on to do. I know people talk about Lost and things like that, which, I mean, Lost was fine with me. I was fine with it until the end. And then obviously when I got into my research, J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof and all that, then I was completely through it. I did throw that out with the bathwater.
Right, okay.
Yeah. But I can see the influence on it a
Lost.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's...
Twin Peaks is massively a big inspiration on Lost. You can see that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's interesting because those guys, especially like Damon Lindelof and that, they're into the esoteric, they're into the Velikovsky Electric Universe, they're into the Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, Crowley, and all that. Mark Frost as well is heavily into all that stuff, And I would imagine that David Lynch is, even though I've never actually caught him on interview saying, yeah, he's very cagey like that. He's done some interesting interviews over the years, though. David Lynch has. I mean, he's asked questions about 9/11 and various other things and that. So he's. And it was interesting that I found out through Andrew Johnson that a number of years back on Red Arse Radio, they had Sean Young, who was obviously in Dune, which was David Lynch, and she'd read Where Did the Towers Go, and that, and talked about it on there.
Right, okay.
There's lots of synchronicities lining up there. I think David Lynch is very clued in. But the flip side of David Lynch as well is that you've got this, which is, I don't particularly have any problem with meditation or that kind of thing, but there are some strange connections there with that foundation of his as well. Now, maybe that's more the money people behind the scenes and it's not him. I don't know. But, some people have said he's like a Kubrick, which I think some of it is like that. Some of it, I don't know. But I don't know what you think about that anyway. But
the transcendental meditation is a big thing for David Lynch. It's clearly a big aspect of Twin Peaks. He clearly brings it into his programs and into his films. Again, without getting maybe too into it yet, there's the whole purple sea that you see in season 3, and that is supposedly the nothingness that you can achieve when you transcend whilst meditating. And he was quoted, wasn't he, as when you do this transcendental meditation, that's normally where he gets his ideas from, and
which we wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for
wouldn't have any of it. No. So he descends, and then he casts a bit. He says he casts a big net, and he captures the fish. And there was a fish in the percolator, of course. So he so he's
percolator.
Yeah. So there's a big influence of transcendental meditation for him. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think it only benefited the program.
Yeah, I think in terms of what it is, yeah, definitely. Yeah, you were saying about the layers with all of this, because outside of that, you have these. Obviously, for people who haven't watched it, we can't talk about it and not spoil it. Really, that's the trouble with this. So, really, what you do find out with the show is that the person that's been sort of abusing the Laura Palmer character, who then is obviously found dead at the very first episode, was killed by her own dad, it seems, but it was actually her dad was possessed by this entity called Bob. There's some questions about whether her mother had an entity in her all along as well. We could perhaps come to that at some point. Whether that's Judy or whatever, we don't know. There's lots of theories on that one. There's lots of these entities in another dimensional realm. And a big part of the series, you hear the characters talking about the Blue Rose cases, and it's tied into like Project Blue Book and UFOs. And you've got this character, Major Briggs, who's got a listening post out in the woods, and he's listening for these signals that have been coming from space, but also from the woods out into space, and to Dale Cooper, the FBI agent, and things like that. So, and then initially you're thinking that it's all about sort of possession, ghosty type stuff, UFOs and all that, but it actually turns out to be something completely different, doesn't it? So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. I've got a great quote actually in one of Mark Frost's books we can come to in a minute and read out.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think for me, when I was watching this, and then it started going from this murder mystery towards this more paranormal side of things. my interest was even more heightened. And yeah, you know, there's a very strong element of ufology in it, particularly with Major Briggs, who's, like you say, has this outpost, and he's getting the and he finds that weird the signal, doesn't he, from space. There is a lot of ufology aspects to Twin Peaks, as you say. Major Briggs almost seems to be running the X-Files almost within Twin Peaks. That seems to be his job. Nobody really knows what he does. He doesn't really. He's not very. You know, he's a bit distant with his own son, which tells you that he's not present as often as he probably could be. Interestingly, of course, the guy playing Major Briggs is Scully's dad in the X-Files, so there's a bit of a crossover there. Yep. So yeah, I mean, when it kind of kicked into that kind of UFOs being involved in Twin Peaks, like I say, my interest heightened even more. So yeah, and I think it's all again to do with this kind of interdimensional, frequency based. The owls are not what they seem. That's one of the lines from Twin Peaks. The owls are not what they seem. Yeah. And actually, if you look at a lot of abduction cases, a lot of people actually mistake or see aliens as owls. And I've always thought there's something there in that quote. I always think that they're intimating there that about aliens, essentially. And in fact, just slightly off topic, a fantastic book by a guy called Mike Cleland called The Messengers, about people that have had abduction cases. And
I've read it. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah. And synchronicities all linked with owls.
Just to tell you a little story, because I work at, just to give you something else back on this one as well, I work in elderly healthcare. Obviously, I can't say too much about it because of the nature of confidentiality and that.
Yes.
But when we take our breaks sometimes at night, because I work night shifts, we nip outside, and whenever there's something going on with the health of the people that live there, they're the owls hooting.
Really?
And it always synchronizes with when we're coming up to maybe a death or something like that. They know.
That's fascinating.
And it's something we all say. We all say, "Oh, the owls are hooting." Something's going on. Yeah.
Well, that links into this book because it talks about these people, and it's whenever they're going through a rough patch in their life or something. You know, there's this kind of similarity in all these stories. Something big is happening in their life, and they encounter this. One always sticks out in my mind about this lady that was pulling onto her drive, and there was like a 4.5 foot owl stood at the edge of her driveway.
Wow.
And it's obviously not an owl. I mean, if you're into if you're into ufology, then you understand about screen memories and how these beings could make you think you're seeing things even though you're not. But she mentions in her story about how at the time she thought it was absolutely fine. Why wouldn't there be a 4.5 foot owl stood at the end of her drive? You know, so I just think there's always been something in Twin Peaks in that line that has just always made me think they're referencing ufology there. I think they're referencing aliens.
Yeah, seeing as we're on the subject, I just thought I'd read that little bit out because I grabbed it out of my book, and it might give people who perhaps aren't so familiar with this just a bit of a better perspective on where we're coming from with this, because these are fascinating books. The Final Dossier and Secret History of Twin Peaks. And I mean, it's fascinating what it gets into. It's written by Mark Frost, who co-wrote the show with David Lynch. So, you know, it's canon stuff. So this is where basically Major Briggs having a conversation. I think it was Douglas Milford actually was the character. Was he the mayor or was he the editor of the newspaper? I can't. There two brothers, weren't they? And the one
isn't he the old guy that gets married to the young girl?
Yeah. So this is so it was Douglas Milford actually, and he was involved with that same project basically that Major Briggs was involved with. Yeah. So he says, I believe that we were able to look deeply at the whole of human history. We would see that they have always been here. So he's a bit of an amorphous they. But in this context, I think he's talking about aliens, things like that. Yeah. I believe they have observed, helped, haunted, tormented, and teased us since the beginning of time for reasons entirely their own. I believe that they are a multitude and that their true nature is singular and energetic, not physical, evolved in some way light years beyond our ability to understand, and a consequence of our limited linear sense of time means nothing to them. A few of us were chosen for some strange purpose to learn more about them, or perhaps for other reasons. I believe their presence fills more than the skies or these woods. They lie at the root cause of every extra normal or paranormal experience our species has recorded. Religious, spiritual, scientific, ghostly, inspirational, angelic, and demonic. From the burning bush to Fatima, to lords, to vampires and sky people, monsters and abductions in the night, and Roswell, Homestead, all those strange lights and crafts seen for millennia by so many skies. I believe all these phenomena that are puffed up egos and busy ant minds persist in trying to label, categorize, penetrate, and comprehend, all spring from this same uncanny source. This is the mother of all others. And were we able to set our eyes on this ultimate nature, we would find it as foreign, incomprehensible, and indifferent to us as ours would be to bacterial microbes swimming in a drop of water. So
that's just summed up Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
You know, everything I explained at the start about my kind of thoughts on the paranormal, he's basically just kind of said that, hasn't he?
Yeah.
You know, he mentioned every single possible aspect of the paranormal.
Of it. Yeah.
UFOs
That's
to
right.
ghosts to monsters to whatever. So and it's a good insight into you know, because obviously Mark Frost co-wrote Twin Peaks, as you say, so it's a good insight as to what they were trying to intimate in the show. And I think those books are brilliant. I mean, if you're a fan of the show, it's almost essential reading.
It is, yeah,
because it gives you a lot of background information, a lot of stuff that you know you see in the show, but it doesn't necessarily get tied up. And these books tie up a lot of loose ends.
Obviously, with Mark Frost being into Crowley and all theosophy and all that kind of stuff, so he must be aware of all that stuff. Again, it's one of those things that we could talk at great length here. It's too long to talk about it, really. This idea, people like Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard going off into the desert and doing these rituals, the Babylon working, the Alamantra ritual to summon forth the great beast, the Scarlet Woman, all that kind of thing. And that kind of, in the books, actually, it kind of intimates that Jack Parson was in that kind of circle of things, doing at that time the bomb testing in the desert, Roswell, all that kind of thing. Yeah. And so
is that the guy who? It's been a while since I read that book. Is he the guy who they basically
was it something like that?
That's it. Yeah, they recruit him into work in this kind of rocket program or something.
He worked for JPL. He was one of the founders of JPL, actually. Yeah, and they were all occultists. Early days of NASA and JPL. They were all
Well, I mean, I'd really be interested to see how much input Mark Frost and David Lynch had in the show, because.
And I'd love to do an interview. I'd love some way, but I doubt they'd very much. Mark Frost maybe a bit more than David Lynch. David Lynch is impenetrable. He just.
Well, yeah, I mean, just before we go a bit onto that, but that interview with David Lynch always sticks out to me, where he says something like, "Eraserhead is my most spiritual film," and the interviewer says, "Would you care to elaborate on that?" And David Lynch just says, "Yeah, that's it." Yeah. He says it's my most spiritual film, and the interviewer says, "Well, can you elaborate on that?" And David Lynch says, "No." And that's it. End of the conversation. So yeah, Mark Frost is always a bit more open. And maybe not open, maybe you could just understand him a bit more, because David Lynch kind of talks in these surreal terms. I was always under the impression that when something was surreal in Twin Peaks, you're getting David Lynch. When something is a bit more earthly, not earthly, I'm talking about UFOs and stuff, or ritualistic, you're getting Mark Frost. And even there's a Masonic element to a huge Masonic element to Twin Peaks. You know, and which
Black
would
Lodge,
come
White
from
Lodge.
the term lodge, the fact they've got the black and white floor.
The ring is almost Masonic. It's almost the
Masonic ring, the symbol. The
compass
compass and the square. You've got the Cooper, I believe, actually wears a Masonic badge.
I think he does at one point in the show.
At some point. So and I think that's Mark Frost.
I do.
That's coming
definitely,
because that's connected to the Aleister Crowley type thing and the ritual thing.
It is, isn't it?
And again, in the dossier book that you've got there, there's even a picture of a Masonic apron, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even the front
somewhere
cover is practically Masonic with the pyramid and the.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's there's a huge Masonic element to the show, and I do believe that's Mark Frost.
Yeah. Funnily enough, actually, let me just pull this up. If I can find the file, I've probably lost it now. I shut my computer down, but just bear with me 2 seconds. I'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of the things that I did was actually just out of curiosity. Because I recently did a bit of a rewatch of Twin Peaks, and I put together a list of yeah, basically I put together a list of all the things that kind of tie into the research that I do, and I suppose obviously what you do as well. So these are things that are in the show and in Fire Walk with Me, the film. So these are just generic things that are. So you got Freemasonry, black and white lodges, energy and consciousness, energy grids, frequencies, ley lines, EMF phenomenon, Native American beliefs, transmutation, divination, alchemy, occultism, the assassination of JFK, missing persons in the wilderness, portals to other realms, dimensions, the 7 portals, the Hell Gate, alternative realities, possession, doppelgangers, dugpas, tulpas, entities from elsewhere, and this is my just a generic term, so energy vampirism and Garmin Bozier. We can talk about that in a minute as well. Alien abduction, UFOs, Roswell, Project Blue Book, SETI, owls and owl symbolism, burial mounds, bones of giants, and by extension a race of giants such as the firemen, stone circles, geological phenomenon, silver and gold symbolism, solar symbolism, fire symbolism, Saturn symbolism, white sands, the Manhattan Project and the Trinity bomb test, the number 7, psychotropics, MK Ultra, visions, altered states, psycho new age mysticism, ritual sacrifice, ritual sex magic, the Babylon ritual, and then these are things that cross into the books as well, which also, so you got things like Project Sign, Project Grudge, Majestic 12, Kenneth Arnold, Lemurians, the Shaver Mysteries, mental transmissions and telepathy, the OSS and the CIA, Operation Paperclip, Jack Parsons, Theosophy, God Consciousness, Illuminati and Skull and Bones, Council on Foreign Relations, Project Aquarius, Project Glean, Pine Gap, Dulce, Dums, Strategic Defense Initiative. I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it?
It's a 101 of conspiracy theories.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. No, people like me, I mean, it's like, come on. I'm in.
Yeah. I think actually, thinking about it, we both share a lot of conspiracy-minded friends. I think they would be more inclined to enjoy Twin Peaks than than somebody else.
And it's one of those strange things because the amount of people I know, probably the same with you as well. Meet them at talks, when you go to other people's talks, you talk online, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Never watched it.
No,
never watched it. Or they're just, that's that David Lynch thing, isn't it, with Laura Palmer, who killed Laura Palmer. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah. I can't even remember why I started watching Twin Peaks. I remember I had one of those dodgy Fire Sticks at the time, so I had access to this this whole world of programs that I didn't normally have access to, and I tell you what it was. I was searching because when Twin Peaks came out, I was like 1 or 2 years old, so not quite old enough to watch it.
Yeah.
So I'd watch Lost.
I'll tell you a funny story about that in a minute. Yeah, go
on. I'd watch Lost, and I think I googled programs like Lost or something.
Yeah, they would say The Prisoner. There's another one.
Yeah. And so all these programs got thrown up. There was one called Fringe, I think, or something like that, which I never got into.
That's another J.J. Abrams type.
But yeah, I gave Twin Peaks a go. And I watched like the first 5 episodes and really liked it. And then I watched them again because I made my wife watch it. And then we just binged it, and we just happened to have done it. I think it was about 6 months before season 3 came out. So we did it. It was good timing, really. But I tell you what, though, it obsessed my life for about 6 months. I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Trying to figure it out, trying to get the theories, trying to understand what the hell was going on. So yeah.
Yeah, I watched it. Let me put it this way. I didn't really watch it until about 15 years ago. I was aware of it, But see, what happened was when it first aired on UK TV, I'm old enough to remember when it aired the first time on UK TV, and there was a massive storm in the Midlands that
Right.
night. And I was on my own in the house, and I was freaked out by this storm, thought the roof was going to come crashing in. So I nipped round to my neighbours and said, "Do you mind if I stay here for a bit? Because I'm freaked out by this storm that's going on." And they were massive Twin Peaks fans. And it was the final episode of season 2, the one,
Right.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
biggie, at the time.
Yeah.
They're sitting there watching it, and there's me going on about the trees falling down in the garden and all this kind of talking all the way through this mammoth epic. Because in those days they didn't repeat things either. They never did find out what happened to Where's Annie?
Where's Annie? Yeah.
I don't think they like me very much.
No.
But spoiler for them. I did watch it though. I went back to it and I loved it. I got into it, and it kind of cemented it for me after season 3. Because again, I'm not going to monopolize your time here, but I've talked about it on other places, and I probably will cover it in another video at some point in the future. But I had a very what I call a reality shift for an extended period of time in 2016 in my life, and whereas basically my memories did not match up with what other people were talking to me about in my life. It went on for quite a few months, freaked me right out, and I don't know if it was some sort of like mind over matter type thing, but I basically didn't want it to happen, and it stopped, and then instantly regretted it. I wanted it to happen. I've had one. I think it was a year or two ago. I had a couple of days where it started again, and I thought, right, let's go. Didn't happen again after that. But I wasn't even aware of the Mandela effect or any of that kind of stuff. I found out about that after these experiences I'd had. And then obviously, because this was 2016, then saw season 3 in 2017, watching these last few episodes where, spoiler alert for those people who haven't watched it yet, basically Dale Cooper prevents Laura Palmer and creates like this tangent reality, as it were, where everything's different. And, Carrie Page she's Laura Palmer effectively, but she can't remember being Laura Palmer till she goes to the house at the end. And that we talked about the woman who owned the real house in real life. We can come into that as well. And when I watched it, I was just blown away. I thought, I wonder if David Lynch has somehow tapped into something that I tapped into. That's the only thing I can think. It's
possible. I've
just in a different way it happened,
I've heard of the Mandela effect. I've never come across anyone like yourself who's had that experience though.
I've come across it since I've found out, started looking into it. I've heard stories, but of course you don't know if people are just making this stuff up. I would accept it if somebody said it to me. If somebody said, if I really went into the depths of the whole story, there's going to be people who say I'm skeptical. That's fine. I get that. I understand that, because I'm the same sometimes with things when people tell me some right flights of fancy. I'm obviously open enough to try and accept, to give them the benefit of the doubt. But there's times where I'm scratching my head and thinking, really, maybe. It's just unique to everybody's individual experience, isn't it? That's the problem.
Well, again, as I said earlier, if we're creating our own reality, then every person's perception of the universe is individual and different.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? About the that sort of alternate reality type thing? Because we talked just before we came on camera about Audrey Horne as well, didn't we? I don't know if you want your insights on that, about what that might be, this sort of tangent reality that's going on in the show, if that's a parallel universe, or if it's something meta to do with the show itself. And
and that's it. There's a 4.5-hour documentary on YouTube by a guy who basically, it's a diploma in Twin Peaks, and I think he's done like another 2 hours since then.
He's done quite a few more since, hasn't he?
Yeah. He's done a lot, and he basically puts the point across that Twin Peaks is a self-aware TV show, and as I mentioned earlier, it was created by David Lynch as this anti-TV program to go against what the TV programs were like in those days. Although it had elements of all of those TV shows,
It did, yeah.
It had the elements of the soap opera.
It even had a
elements of
mock soap opera, didn't it?
It had the mock soap opera in there.
That was going on in the background while the real things in the show were happening.
Invitation to Love, or whatever it was called. And in the soap opera, as Twin Peaks progresses, you see more of the soap opera because people are watching it on telly. And one of the storylines is about how two of the characters are played by the same actress, and then in Twin Peaks, the girl that plays Laura Palmer comes back and plays Laura Palmer's cousin.
Yeah, Maddie.
So it's mirroring the soap opera that's happening on telly.
Yeah.
So so this guy puts across that it's essentially a self-aware TV program, and there are different elements within the show that are mimicking real life and mimicking the world of TV. And Dale Cooper is essentially us. So we are the investigators. We want to know what's happened. We want to know what's going on. And he is the manifestation of the audience within the TV show, trying to find out what's going on. And there's violence within the TV show. There's this guy called Bob who's possessing people and killing people. And that is the violence of the TV world. That is the violence that we have grown to love, that we want to consume from TV. We want violence. We want to know who killed that person. Why did they kill them? I mean, nowadays, you look at how many people are obsessed with serial killer some really sick stuff that people actually enjoy sitting and watching.
It's bizarre, because just to interject just for 1 second, I did a recorded an interview recently with a discussion about Metropolis with Mark Devlin. And we were talking about this idea of people wanting that sort of the violence and the justice account. And I don't generally tend to get drawn to those types of programs. They're not. I prefer something much more light-hearted, happier, more positive. Yeah. So it's unusual for me to find something so with Twin Peaks, because on any given day, I hold Twin Peaks up as probably one of the best TV shows ever made.
I think it's because it's almost done.
Weird.
It's done tongue in cheek though, almost. It is this kind of meta of what's going on in the real world, and what's interesting is when you then watch. I mean, I could go really into, again, probably a whole show in itself, but I would just tell anyone, go and watch the 4.5 hour documentary on YouTube. I've actually watched that more times than I've watched Twin Peaks. It is mind blowing. The guy, in my mind, the guy has nailed it. And of course, people disagree with him, but that's what David Lynch is all about. Until David Lynch comes out and tells us what Twin Peaks is about, we will never know. But when you look at season 3, which happened 25 years after season 1 and season 2, the world has changed. Our world has changed. As I say, that TV and film has got a lot more violent. The world has got a lot more violent. People's attention spans have shrunk thanks to things like social media and stuff like that. So people that were watching the season 3 of Twin Peaks, well, firstly, the vast majority of it doesn't actually happen in Twin Peaks.
No, it doesn't.
And I remember reading reviews at the time of people saying, this isn't Twin Peaks. Those lovable characters that we have,
weird, isn't it?
Are gone. The lovable characters have gone. There's a lot more violence in this than there was in the other seasons. And that's David Lynch, basically, once again, mirroring what's happening on today's TV. So he did it in the old series and he's doing it now. There's more violence because there is more violence on TV. And some of the things that are in season 3 really cement this theory for me. And there's 2 things that stand out. There's the bit where a child gets run over and killed.
Oh yeah.
And that is a
harrowing, isn't it?
Yes. David Lynch is very he likes his kind of extended scenes, that famous scene with the guy sweeping the floor in the bar for about 3 hours. And this scene was extended almost to the point where you were like, come on now, this is enough, just this woman cradling her dead son. And while that's happening, you have this crowd of people stood around her, watching her, but doing nothing about it. None of them are helping her. None of them are stepping in. They're just watching. And to me, that is symbolism. It's a metaphor for what happens in the real world and on TV. These people are watching the TV And these two characters, the dead son and the mother, are the TV characters.
Yeah.
And therefore, these people are consuming the violence. They want the violence. They're soaking it in. They're not doing anything about it. They're not getting involved. They're not getting attached. At the end of the program, they turn the TV off and they go and make their tea. But they've consumed their violence. So that scene really sticks out to me. And the other scene is the one that happens pretty much at the start, where you've got this big box, and there's this big glass box, and there's this guy who's sitting there with a coffee or whatever, who's watching this box, and you learn that that's his job. He's being paid to watch the box. He doesn't know why, but he's being paid to watch the box. And then his girlfriend comes around, brings him a coffee, and they're sat together watching the box. And then all of a sudden they start to strip naked and start to have sex in front of the box, and then this big the monster, or whatever you want to call it, Judy or whatever, comes into the box and kills them and attacks them. Now, I think that is essentially David Lynch's version of Netflix and chill. So they are watching the box, they are watching the TV, they are making out in front of the TV like you would as a couple, and all of a sudden, violence. Just like what's on TV now, we're consumed with violence. So this monster comes in, it attacks them, it kills them. Metaphorically, it kills them in the show, but I think it's supposed to be a metaphor. And therefore, they have consumed the violence from the box, which is the TV. So those two scenes really stick out for me. That what David Lynch is doing here is he has created a program, a series that is essentially mimicking and mocking TV programs.
There's that famous scene in Fire Walk with Me where you see Bowie as Philip Jeffries, and he says, I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy, that kind of thing. And I thought my interpretation of that was, when you look at what happened with the show, that they forced him to resolve the murder mystery, then he left and he came back and directed the end, and then the film comes along. I mean, at this point, he was still making the film. So after the fact, when it was released, people were saying, again, like season 3, they were saying, where's all the other characters in the show? This is just about Leyland Palmer and Laura Palmer and Bob, and kind of right down. And I'm thinking, if we extend that metaphor with Judy, when he's saying we're not going to talk about Judy, he's like, we're not going to talk about what Twin Peaks was before. This is now something completely different.
Absolutely. I think, again, I don't think we've really covered that yet, but David Lynch wanted to extend this murder mystery because he didn't want to have this kind of this monster a week type format that the TV shows had back in the 90s. So but the studio were pressuring him to reveal who the murderer was. So I think it was episode 7 of season 2 where it was revealed who the murderer was. At that point, David Lynch leaves Twin Peaks, and to be honest, Twin Peaks goes a bit downhill for the rest of the season.
I think until Wyndham Earl comes into it again. I like it from Wyndham Earl onwards.
I think it's about then, and then David Lynch comes back in and essentially does the last episode of season 2, and then you get the film. And I think what it is I think the film was his way of saying, no, tough. Like I wanted to all of the stuff I wanted to put in the program, I'm now going to put in the film because I can. And a lot of people said that, like, we've already been through this. We've already seen Laura Palmer's death. Why do we need to see? Why are you still focusing on that? But it's because you took it away from him in the series. You made him reveal the murderer, and I think that was his way of saying, so now I'm going to give it you like twice as thick now. You're gonna get it double. And it's a great film. And again, lots of elements in that lend itself to this kind of meta kind of mocking of a reality. And I genuinely believe that that's what David Lynch is trying to put across.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Yeah. I like the fact that an additional layer to this show is, like we were saying about the research that we do. That tends to be, for me, I feel like it's a lot more of the Mark Frost stuff, which I really can sort of relate to it on that level. But I also love the sort of a bizarre level of it that David Lynch is on, which is very much like Stanley Kubrick with his films. It's that kind of putting it out there, leaving it for the audience to interpret for themselves. I'm not going to tell you what it means. They probably do know themselves.
I thought about this though, Carl. Like I think David Lynch is a clever guy. how much of it does he actually know? I mean, I've just kind of sat there and said I think there's a theory to it, and I think David Lynch knew what he was doing. But you'd be forgiven for thinking, did he, or does he just kind of throw crap at a wall, sees what sticks, kind of thing, and then
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
I don't know. I think they needed each other. It's quite interesting actually, because one of the best quotes I've read from David Lynch was he talks about the white picket fence, and he's very much about balance. And if you watch his films and Twin Peaks, it's about light and dark and good and evil.
Yeah.
And he talks about the white picket fence, and it looks beautiful, and it's a great little clean, nice, beautiful fence. And when you look at the bottom of the fence, you start to see the bugs and the muck and the mud and the dirt, and it's a stark contrast to the white, beautiful fence.
It is.
You need it. You need it. You need the muck and the dirt in order to appreciate the beautiful white picket fence. So it's almost like you need the evil in the world to shine a light on the good in the world, and just like there's balance there, I think there's balance with Lynch and Frost. And I think if it wasn't for Frost, I think we would have had this incredibly overly surreal program that we wouldn't have been able to interpret. We wouldn't have known anything about. And I think if it hadn't have been for Lynch, then we might have ended up with essentially just a standard murder mystery program. It's probably somewhere that Mark Frost would have taken it. With a touch of paranormal,
maybe a touch of the X-Files type of thing.
Exactly.
Into that territory.
But I think together they lend to each other really, really well. And like I said, I would love to have been there in the writing process, because I think there would have been some arguments. I think you would have had Lynch saying, I want to take it this way. You would have had Frost saying, I want to. And this is why it's so good, how they've managed to achieve this program where they've managed to capture both of their ideas. And let's be honest, they're completely different ideas.
They are.
But they've managed to capture them both and put them into a coherent storyline. And I think that is the sheer talent right there.
I can't help but sometimes take what I would call the Mark Frost stuff very literal sometimes. Maybe that's because of the type of research I do, but I interpret things literally as other dimensions, God consciousness, Akashic record, morphic resonance, all that kind of stuff, energy. But then sometimes when you see David Lynch and he's going on about electricity and he's doing all this thing with his hands, like frequency thing and all that, and you're thinking, unless he's got Parkinson's, coming on. But he's like, it's almost like you think, he does get it as well. He does get that.
There must be some common ground between the two of them. When they were sat down writing the program, there must have been enough common ground for them to be able to write a program together. But I can guarantee there was some frustrations from both of them. Towards each other. So people could either look at this and go, "Oh, this is interesting," or "No, it's that guy."
We've touched all the touchstones are there, aren't there? We've mentioned about this great evil. I mean, when I'd like to sort of at some point maybe get into this idea of like the fireman and the arm and all these entities that live in what's that all about?
Where do they live?
A lot of that is interpretation, isn't it? And sometimes you look at a room. There's elements of the Red Room that sometimes that feel like it's quite sort of a peaceful place, but it's clearly within the Back Lodge. And then there's elements that were referred to as being within the White Lodge, but they look very like dark and demonic, and so. It's what you were saying about is nothing's ever cut and dried. There's a very fine line between it's in the grey, isn't it? You've got these extremes, but it's in the grey.
It's the balance, like I've said. It's this kind of and what you've just said. With the giant, the fireman, and the arm. Again, you've got the balance. You've got the fireman that releases Laura Palmer into the world, and you've got the arm and the lodge that releases Bob into the world. So it's almost that they are the parents of good and good versus evil. And they've unleashed it onto the world, and the battle has taken place.
Some thoughts before we wrap these things up, because I'd be interested to get your take on this one. That whatever that is that's going on with Sarah Palmer in the third season, and it's generally there's a general consensus that is Judy. Although some people have said not necessarily. I mean, what's your take on that? And the other thing would be, was it there all along from because it's implied and it's actually stated by Mark Frost in the book that thing that came out of the desert when the atomic bomb went off went into Sarah Palmer. Was it dormant? Was it asleep? A bit like Bob was as a child because Leyland was very young, wasn't he, when he was possessed by Bob?
Yes,
if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
were they both? And if you read the thing about Bob and Judy, it's like almost like the marriage of the two things to create the great evil. Yet they're living under the same house together, married and right. So what's that about? Go on.
I think there's the bug that crawls into that girl's mouth. It's never actually directly implied in the program, is it? That is Sarah Palmer.
No, the book says outright it is.
But the book goes on to say that it is. I think it crawls into her mouth, so it's laid there dormant, and then there's obviously the famous scene in season 3 where she takes her face off, and there's this thing there. I mean, awful CGI, really, but scary.
I like
at the
it
same
though.
time.
I like it.
It lends itself to it. I don't know. I mean, if I was to go down the route of this kind of meta TV show that we've spoke about, you would say that it was around that time that TV was created, and so not that it was created, but like people started to watch soap operas at home. So people didn't go out to the cinemas anymore. It was around that time where Sarah Palmer was a girl that they're watching TV shows at home. So they're beginning to consume this violence or this stuff at home. So is that a metaphor for her swallowing this violence, swallowing this kind of consumerism? People say that that's the case. In terms of Judy and Bob, you're absolutely right. We still don't really know who Judy is.
No. We shouldn't really be talking about Judy, should we? We're not going to talk about her at all.
But Bob is Bob, and we know who Bob is. And Bob is an evil entity that possesses people and feeds off death and negativity. We don't really know who Judy is. I mean, it's implied that she is born out of this atomic blast in the desert, and she's born, and then she vomits, doesn't she, and gives birth to Bob's face. So Judy
doesn't Gordon Cole call her
Jowday?
She was Jowday.
Jowday.
She's going into sort of mythology of going like the great evil, going way back in religious texts and things like that.
And I think he likens it to the jinn or something as well, which of course is the evil entities. But this monster Judy throws up and kind of vomits this ectoplasm that and Bob's face is in it. So Judy is Bob's mom. So I personally I think if you take season 8 at face value, then Judy is the birth of evil, the atomic bomb. David Lynch clearly sees that as a time when, I mean, obviously evil has been around before, but
of course,
just for this purpose, it's the birth of evil, and that evil has then created Bob, and Bob is the evil that we consume on TV. Because she throws up loads of little things you don't really see. You only really see Bob. So Bob is the TV violence, but she might have thrown up other things like real life violence and something else that is vile and something else that is evil. All these little things, but you only really see Bob. So I think it's what you're seeing is the birth of TV violence. And Bob is, and interestingly, you will know this. The guy that plays Bob, it was
a happy accident, wasn't it?
He was he like a cameraman or a sound
decorator or something like that? Yeah, it was technical crew, wasn't he? Something like that. Yeah.
And they accidentally caught him in the mirror while they were filming a scene. He appeared in the mirror, and so they went, "Oh, that's good. We'll go with him." So again, even there, you have this kind of, even though it's an accident, but you have this crossover of a real life person playing a character in a program almost. So that's always interested me. But so I think Bob is the personification of TV violence, and what you see in episode 8 is Judy, if that is Judy, because we don't really know, giving birth to the only thing that I think that makes you makes it possible to say that it is Judy is that Mr. C, the bad doppelganger, has that card with the picture of the round circle with the little horns on. And
That's
if you
right.
look at the monster that's coming out of the atomic bomb, she has these little kind of horns
She
on her
does.
head.
Yeah.
And he refers to the card as Judy. So
Mm.
therefore that means that monster must be Judy as well.
Yeah.
I think we need to do another program.
Yeah. There's
Go a lot
loads we
deeper
could
into
talk
it.
about. Yeah. And I don't want to hold you up anymore because I know you've got things to do. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. It's been an absolute treat for me. It really has, because I've been dying to talk to somebody about the esoteric meta levels of Twin Peaks. Yeah. So
Great. Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kieran. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. You're welcome. So hopefully we'll get together and do some more at some point. Let me know and we'll arrange that. Yeah.
That's the plan.
And for whoever's watching this, it's a bit of an acquired taste, but I will say, if you have enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff that YouTube hates, but we love it when we try our best anyway. Thank you again to Kieran, and I will see you again very, very soon. Bye bye for now.